This episode of the Quantum Leap podcast is dedicated to the memory of Joe Napolitano.
Greetings, Dr. Beckett. Welcome to the Quantum Leap podcast.
The streets are swarming with cops, man. Their arresting brothers were just walking down the street.
For what?
For what? Does it matter? Does it ever matter? They beat a pregnant woman in the middle of the street because she tried to stop two cops from clubbing a black man.
Lonnie, don't start this.
Start what, man? Are we gonna let a bunch of honky cops stomp us into the ground, man, because we fighting back for once? We gotta take back our streets.
It's not your fault, Sam. You're not here to stop the riot. You're here to see that Ray and Susan stay together.
People are dying, Al.
Well, Susan may be one of them.
What?
I don't know. Ziggy's telling me now there's a 32% chance that she could die in the next 48 hours.
Is there something I did? Some history that I changed? Or
No, I don't think so. The odds are still heavy that you're here to keep Ray and Susan together. Now there's just this outside chance that maybe she could die.
Hello and welcome back to the Quantum Leap podcast. I'm Albie.
And I'm Heather.
And we have a great show today. We have two excellent guests. We have Corie Knights, who played Susan, and we have SaMi Chester.
Woohoo.
We are doing something a little bit different today. Heather and I agreed that we really had no frame of reference to talk about this episode by ourselves, and it would be almost wrong to discuss this episode being that we both have backgrounds just growing up in white suburbs and really don't understand what it would be like to be in a situation like the Watts riots. So what we did is we asked our good friend Deborah Pratt, co-creator and co-executive producer and writer of Quantum Leap, writer of this episode, in fact, to join us for our discussion on this episode. Now, Miss Deborah Pratt, welcome to the Quantum Leap podcast. How are you doing today?
I'm great, thank you. How are you?
I'm doing really good now that you're here.
Hi.
Hi, Heather.
Amazing episode that we're talking about today, Black and White on Fire. I'd just like to get your initial reactions after rewatching it after all these years.
You know, it kind of blew me away. I was so surprised by just the passion that all the performers did.
Yes.
Well, SaMi Chester, for one, I thought was excellent. Corie Knights, who played Susan, but Lonnie was outstanding. Yeah, Greg Millar. He passed away in 2003. It broke my heart because I really thought he had a huge career ahead of him.
He was amazing in this episode. Like, it was more than acting, I think. I felt like he was that character.
You know, I got that from a lot of people that were on the show and a lot of people that watched the show, because the research that I did on it, I really explored what was happening at the time, which if you listen to Al's dialogue, he really talks about the fact that the Watts riots didn't happen because of a series of events. It happened because of 30 years of neglect in an area. And I wanted to really infuse that. And then just that kind of a heat wave was happening, the racism that was happening in Los Angeles, but around the country at the time. And it was like people had had enough. And we couldn't get out. I mean, they would have brought the National Guard in, so blacks couldn't get out to protest. And the only place they had to protest was their own home, their own neighborhood, their own area. And they burned it down. And that was the one thing I remember. After I wrote the script, I went to the post-production people, and I said, I want you to pull as much of the riot footage as you can. And so we had a huge amount of the riot footage before we ever started shooting, so that Cameron Burney and the production team could build scenes that we could directly tie into the original footage of the Watts riot. And that's why I think it flows so seamlessly, because we literally set up shots to go into news footage.
One I'm thinking of in particular is the gentleman that throws the Molotov cocktail, and then you see the fire truck, and it lands on the fire truck, and the fire truck catches on fire.
Yeah, Joe Napolitano, God rest his soul, another one that passed away on this. He was right with me on setting that all up, so I found it very exciting.
Speaking of Joe, what was it like to work with Joe Napolitano?
Joe was a professional. He had a vision. He knew what he wanted to shoot. He was funny. He had a confidence on the set that made everybody feel comfortable. He was working with, groups of African Americans who were doing an amazing piece of history that had not had a light shined on it for 25 years. And I thought he was sensitive to what we were playing with. And then CCH Pounder, she's amazing. I love her. That was the first time we had worked together. And then I hired her again on a film I directed called Cora Unashamed. And I just loved how much she brought to that. I mean, her scene when she came in from the bus, they had overturned the bus and she came in, was originally a much bigger monologue that someday, I swear, I've always said I want to write the play of Black on White on Fire. I thought should have won an Emmy. It was so well done.
She is amazing.
And to say about Black on White on Fire, it's a little insane how it still applies today.
Yeah, it does. I thought the same thing.
You would think by now we would be in a better place, really. And I guess kind of we are, but in a lot of ways we aren't. In a lot of ways we're still stuck in that or going backwards even.
I agree. I think that what has happened is we became politically correct. So people who didn't feel comfortable saying what they were feeling allowed it to go in the closet. And then when our new president came into being and said whatever he wanted to say, all those people kind of crawled out and said, oh, yeah, well, if he can do it, I can do it. So now that anger, and that's something that is very hard to understand, the anger at whites against blacks and the system that's set up against them. And you know, slavery's never ended. It's just changed names. And I think blacks have been articulate to as far as they can be, and then it's going to get, you know, angry and violent, and it happened then, and I can foresee it happening again. I'm hoping that the more of I'm younger. I'm 28, so I'm a little bit younger than Albie, but I think a lot of my generation is starting to realize, like, and speak up, and I'm hoping that that's kind of the turn of events, and we can all kind of get behind one side and not have, you know, this back and forth. But I think that, you know, with the current events that happened, and that I think the scary part is it's like a group of it's angry racism as a group, and I think that's the force that is a scary force, the group of angry racism. I agree. And I think you're absolutely right. Your generation, I have 2 kids in your generation, and I know I raised them to be human first. Right. And I think that, you know, I went to the Women's Day March. I've been to a couple of marches, and I really find that the love that people have gets past that. Yeah. And so it's, you know, hatred is taught. It's not in your DNA. It is taught by somebody who is angry at something that they feel that they were neglected or didn't get or whatever. And they need somebody to take it out on. Mm-hmm. And I think I tried to hit those points in this episode too, where, you know, black people were angry, white people were angry. And it's just an anger that it comes from other things, and you need somebody to take it out on. And now it's systemic, or even back then it was systemic. It's in the system. And so what we have to do is talk about it, which is what we're doing right now. You know, Quantum Leap was so wonderful a show in the fact that it gave people a platform to have a conversation about what's going on today, looking back, you know, 20 years, 30 years, and feeling like it was safe to talk about it.
I'm sure we'll talk about that and much, much more after the episode recap. This is Season 3, Episode 7, Black on White on Fire. Original broadcast date, November 9th, 1990. Written by Deborah Pratt and directed by Joe Napolitano.
Sam leaps in and is kissed by a beautiful young white woman named Susan Brewster, but their rendezvous is interrupted when they are ambushed by 3 black men. Pinned to a wall, Sam gets a glimpse of his reflection and finds that he is also a black man. Sam's alter ego is a medical student named Ray Harper, younger brother of Lonnie, one of his 3 attackers. Lonnie and his friends Bebe and Papa D wonder if Ray has forgotten what color he is, but Sam says color should have nothing to do with relationships. Sam drives Susan home. She vows to do whatever it takes to be with Ray, but is interrupted by her father, Police Captain Paul Brewster, who angrily tells Sam to stay away from Susan and orders Susan to stay out of Watts, as blacks are beating whites. Back in Watts, Al arrives. Sam tells him that he is a black man engaged to a white woman and that nobody wants them together. Al doesn't yet know what Sam is there to do, only that he is at the beginning of some of the worst riots in U.S. history. Ziggy gives it an 87% chance that Sam is there to keep Ray and Susan together. In the original history, they broke up after the riot, and Ray lost his dream of becoming a doctor. Their conversation is interrupted by Lonnie, who says the streets are swarming with cops, arresting black people. He tries to incite everyone to fight back and join the riot. Ziggy then predicts a 32% chance Susan will die in the next 48 hours. A car pulls up and Susan calls to Sam. She was so worried about Ray that she felt like she had to be with him. Al tells Sam to get her out of sight. He brings her to Ray's apartment. The next morning, Lonnie returns home with Bebe and Papa D. Bebe has bad gashes in his arms that need to be stitched up. Sam realizes that he and Susan should be at the medical clinic where they can help the people who are injured in the riot. After a bloody night, Lonnie and Bebe bring Papa D to the clinic, who has been shot by police. But it's too late. Papa D is dead. Lonnie is determined that no more brothers will die, then holds Susan at gunpoint and delivers an ultimatum. Either the killing of the black people stops, or she will be executed. Lonnie takes Susan hostage in Ray's apartment, saying the death of a black man is always forgotten, but a white death will make the whites realize they went too far. Ziggy gets a lock on Susan, and Sam rushes to the apartment, untying Susan. Susan reveals that Lonnie wants to die. Al agrees, thinking Lonnie wants to be a martyr. But Sam tries to convince Lonnie that the community needs him to stay alive, to make sure nothing like these riots can ever happen again. It looks like Sam is getting through to Lonnie, but another black death is shown on the news. Incensed, Lonnie decides to shoot Susan. Sam gets between her and Lonnie, saying he can't believe that his brother would murder the woman he loves. Breaking down in tears of pain, Lonnie drops the gun and tells Sam and Susan to get out. But when they move away from the window, Lonnie is shot and killed by a police sniper. Sam takes Lonnie in his arms and cries uncontrollably, vowing that his death can't be for nothing and that he has to stay in Watts to be a doctor. Susan agrees, saying they'll stay in Watts together. Al tells Sam that he kept Ray and Susan alive and together and has completed his mission. But Sam, still cradling Lonnie's body, questions whether it is enough, right as he leaps.
Did you get a lot of flack at the time for airing that episode?
Oh, yeah. It wouldn't air in the South because, and here's what's so ridiculous. Because Sam kissed Susan Brewster, they wouldn't play it. But here's what's crazy. Sam's not black.
Right.
So anytime they kissed, if you look at it, it's 2 white people kissing. However, they literally banned it in, I want to say Alabama, Tennessee. They banned it because it was even the inference, the illusion that it was an interracial relationship.
And those are all those places that still teach that the Civil War was fought over state taxes.
Yeah.
I mean, it's crazy. It's crazy that people still, I know that it aired, 30 years ago or whatever, but I mean, it's crazy that people are just so set in their ways and the anger is so deep rooted that, and nobody knows why. I mean, there's no reason why like there's a divide other than because of somebody once decided there should be. You know, like it's just insane to think.
Well, there's a different way to look at it. Blacks were used like oil is used.
Right.
They built the country. We built the country, and it was free labor. So you paid for oil, and you put it in the ground. So to have somebody take away your oil, that was their property, and that's where a lot of that anger came from. And then it just went from, you know, slavery to redlining to where people couldn't buy homes or get loans or anything like that, and then to the industrial prison system. Jim Crow was in there, where they just made laws that always blocked the African American, and still do. I read an article today that the last African American bank in Chicago closed down. Black-owned bank closed down, which is so sad. And those banks came up because white banks wouldn't give loans for blacks to buy homes and start businesses. So we are moving back. You're absolutely right.
Yeah.
SaMi Chester, he was a real important character for me too, because he laid out a lot of the exposition and logic of what was happening on the other side. Lonnie's story was very personal. Bebe's was the bigger story of what was happening and what the anger was on the other side. And Al was the voice of reason, understanding why it was happening and that we can't let it happen again. But we didn't quite get there.
When you originally conceived of this episode, like, where did the idea to do the Watts riots come from? And was the interracial relationship always part of the episode?
I think it was the anniversary of the Watts riot, and I started doing research on it. And the more research I did on what led up to it, and the historical lead up to it, as well as the actual events of the day, I went and talked to a number of African-American DJs who were reporting from the streets at the time. And I really felt like, and I wish I could remember their names, I really felt like they were telling a story. And Hollywood is tough in a sense that if you tell just a black story, a lot of times you don't get an integrated audience. And I thought I have an amazing opportunity to tell Romeo and Juliet in the middle of the Watts riot.
Wow.
And that's kind of where it came together. This is my Romeo and Juliet. And the fact that in real history it failed. They failed to stay together, and Sam was there. And the other thing, if you notice, Sam keeps saying, you know, she loves me, she loves me, she loves me. And Al keeps saying, no, she loves Ray.
Right. Yeah.
And I like the idea that Sam was so caught up in the love that he began to believe it.
Right.
That these people had to stay together because they were truly in love with each other.
Watching this, I was thinking, did you use any of your real life experiences in this episode? Something that you could speak to that other writers maybe couldn't have?
Well, I was brought up on the south side of Chicago, and I remember when there were riots in Chicago, and my father, who was head of the National Guard in Chicago, gave us guns and posted us at the window. He says, anybody come in this house, pull the trigger.
Wow.
Yeah. And he had taught us how to use guns at a very early age, and we just didn't know what was going to happen. And then growing up, I would go to see my grandparents in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. And I remember, you know, colored bathrooms and colored fountains and colored theaters. So I grew up understanding segregation. But because I have mixed heritage, I didn't have to deal with it the same way people with browner skin did. It wasn't always in my face because it just wasn't. That uniform of a color of skin makes a huge difference of how you are dealt with from across the room. And it's so embedded to be afraid of a black person. It's the same kind of thing that, you know, it's happening with Latinos, saying that they're only rapists and robbers. And, you know, that's that same mentality. And you hear it enough, and you see somebody coming at you that has that look or doesn't look like you, and a fear comes up that's almost primitive. So we have to change the dialogue of how we talk about people. We have to change, the fear to love. And that's what I really wanted Black on White on Fire to be. Everybody's got their anger. But if we just take a moment and help each other, we can become human. And that's the evolution that I write about in the Vision Quest books, the Atlantean, and then next week the Academy comes out. So I have a series of 5 books that are going to be coming out, hopefully before the summer, if I finish the 5th book.
Awesome.
That deals with the spirituality of our evolution as humans. And we've got to get away from our anger and our fear.
Well, I think the biggest part of Black on White on Fire, when the dad, she's saying you didn't have to shoot him, and he goes, well, we didn't know that, because she said he let me go, and he says we didn't know that. And I think that line is so important, because they were so scared and they were so blinded by hatred and race and just seeing that he was evil in their eyes, and there was no question. They didn't even think, why did they move out of the way? They just shot him. And then he said, we didn't know that. And that, I think that speaks huge on even things that happen today, like people getting shot, Black men getting shot without being armed or even any crime of any sort, being targeted, and everybody it's like, okay, well, they were frightened or something. And it's like, you can't you're scared of something you don't know. You can't just shoot without, of a blind fear. So I think that was a huge moment for me, because it was just like, we didn't know that. And that doesn't fix anything that you acted with that on fear without knowing what you were doing. Exactly.
Mark Aliamo was Police Captain Paul Brewster.
Yeah, he was really good in this episode. I know him mostly from Star Trek Deep Space Nine, but he did really good in this episode, I think. And he believed what he was saying. Yeah, and it brings something out in people when it comes to fear. Fear changes people. And I think it cores into the essence of who you are. When you're confronted with life and death, a whole other level of survival comes out, and you go to what you think is going to keep you alive. And the sad part is all the police violence against Blacks should not fit in that category, and somehow it does. For somebody to empty their entire gun in somebody who just says, I just want to go home, is absurd. And so it hasn't stopped. We're 30 years on, and it needs to stop now.
Yeah, well, I don't think I'm a pretty peaceful person, and I don't believe in violence curing violence. So I looked at the riots and the police beating and shooting, and I understand that they have to control the crowd or whatever. That's what their intentions were. But coming at violence to cure violence is just that's why the Women's March was so amazing, that it wasn't violent. And I think a lot of people thought that, that sort of movement would be violent because of what had happened the day prior, right after the inauguration. But that's the kind of thing that we need more of, is those peaceful protests and those, all coming together and showing love. And I think what's big for hopefully my generation and generations following mine is I was born in New Jersey and was there until high school and moved to Florida. And in both places that I've lived, I was never, it was such a mixed cultural experience. I mean, in New Jersey, it's all different cultures that have come through New York and kind of moved down to New Jersey, that you're constantly in with all sorts of different people. And then Florida is just a big melting pot as well. So I'm hoping the more our country is mixed up and we are constantly surrounded by different cultures. I mean, my 4-year-old has no concept of differences like that. Like she obviously she can see different colors of skin, but she doesn't think of ranking anybody by their color of their skin, because she has no concept of that. And hopefully the more our country can evolve like that, I'm hoping that so can, the opinions. But unfortunately, opinions often come from your parents, and it's brought down with those hateful and racist comments through your parents that's learned, like you had mentioned earlier, that hate is learned. So we have to somehow break that cycle. And I don't know, I'm hoping that all of the things that are happening recently get more people involved and get more people to stand up and see what's right, because it could go very wrong. And we have to, in the entertainment industry, make a change too, in the news industry and in the entertainment industry, because we have to just stop depicting, here's the white policeman and here's the white policewoman, and they go out and they go and deal with the drug dealers, and the drug dealers are black or Latino or Middle Eastern, and they all have guns and they're going to kill us. So think of the message that's coming through on that side. Right. And I think television is broadening. It's beginning to broaden. It's not there yet, but it's certainly beginning to broaden the scope of who's telling the story. And the other thing that I think is happening is films like Hidden Figures. It's very hard to get a black positive film made. Very hard, because the people that control the distribution and the funding, they want violence and so the audiences have got to come out and stand up for these kinds of films. Right. And go see them and put their money down on the table. If not, they're going to go, well, they don't want this. Well, and I think a lot of times in the media, when something happens, like the mosque in Canada, that was there was a massacre that happened, and they painted out the white terrorist who did it to be they were like student, former so and so, like the college student who raped the girls, who was a former athlete. So they paint white terrorists, white people who commit crimes, as what they do, what their sport they're involved in, what they do, and not who they are. Yeah. And but then if it's turned and it's a crime that occurs, at the hands of a black man, it says black man or Muslim man, or it goes by that. And that's, I think, a huge thing. But what's awesome about our social media, about our voices that we all have now, and it's not just the news that you see at night on your television, the fact that we can all speak up. A lot of people are calling out the news saying, don't profile someone like that. Say this, this is who did this, not he was a former athlete, or he used to play rugby, whatever it was. Yeah, they're very protective. Yeah. It's very protective, and you're absolutely right. And we need to teach our kids. Teach our kids. And I think that was the beauty of Quantum Leap. As a writer, I had the opportunity to take time, literally take time, and write stories that were relevant then, but I think they're still relevant today, and put them in a time that could give people a little piece of history that they may not have been aware of or understood or known. So I'm very proud of Black on White on Fire. I think everybody that was involved, Joe and SaMi and Lonnie and Scott, gave an incredible performance, especially that last scene holding his brother in his arms. I mean, you felt for him there. So I was very proud of that show. And yeah, this episode is amazing. Yeah. Thank you.
That part was heartbreaking. Watching it, I know when I saw it as a youth, and but Heather just saw it recently for the first time, and she was saying, I know someone's going to die. I don't know who's going to die. And none of it can be good. When you were writing that scene, did you know who was going to die at the end, or what was the possibility of other people dying, like Susan?
Well, I wanted you to feel like it could just be anybody.
Yeah, that's what I felt.
Yeah, I wanted to feel like, that that's why they were in the line of that shot. So had he shot any earlier, Sam could have died, Susan could have died, And the fact that at that moment, Lonnie saw the light, and it was very important that he saw the light and they put it out.
Yeah.
So you just don't even get the opportunity. So, I try to take the end to the next level where it says, you did it, Sam. They stay together. They build a clinic in the inner city, and, they have kids, and they do all this, so that there was a positive note to it. But the truth was the big evolution, the arc of Lonnie, who was so militant and belligerent, was, I can't fight this fight. I wanted to change too. And I don't want to die for that change. And he died for that change.
Yeah.
And so, as so many have.
You could understand his frustration where he was coming from. It's just not the best way to handle it, I guess.
Yeah. And if you listen to the setup and the things that Dean Stockwell says as how this is building, it's still building. There are no jobs. There's no, you can't buy a home. You can't get a loan. You can't. And when they arrest black men and put them in prison, they're always put in prison for felonies. And then when they get out, they have no rights. They can't vote. They can't get a job. Because once you put that you've been in jail for a felony, even if what you did wasn't a felony, you can never, ever get a loan, buy a car, buy a house. You're ruined for the whole life. And you can't vote. Go figure that out. So again, it's a systemic change that has to change.
Exactly. Do you see us ever getting there? And how do you think we will?
Well, you have to buy the Vision Quest.
well, that goes without saying, of course.
Yes, I do see us getting there because, it's up to us. It's the collective consciousness of good that we all have to believe that we can get there together. And standing with 700,000 men and women out that Women's March downtown LA made me feel like, okay, there are enough people here who are going to come out and stand for good. Because right now, the battle of good against evil is an ancient, frightening one. And we need to come together, stand up, and be willing to show in numbers and in force that we're ready to make a change. And people that have the power to make a change, if you work in a bank, give somebody a loan to buy a house, to create a job. I mean, they're talking about sending the National Guard into Chicago. That's frightening. Frightening.
Yeah, see, I think, not that I'm happy about any of the current events, but I think that it's going to force people to actually stand up. And that's what I'm being hopeful about, is that people are going to continue to stand up and not just let it go. Because at this point, you have no choice. You have to stand up for good.
Yeah.
Or you're with the bad.
And you have to be willing to get, confronted. I put some tweets out and people confronted me, really nasty stuff. And I turned it around on them. And I said, well, tell me what you want. Because what you're going to find out is you and I want the same thing. And I really don't care who gets it for us.
Yeah.
We just need to stand together to do it. And that's what nobody's doing. They're not asking each other, well, what is it that you want? I want clean water. I want a home for my kids. I want education for my kids. I want a job. Here's what I want. Isn't that what you want? Yeah.
Right.
So let's stop fighting each other and figure out how to get it.
Yeah, I think we have a lot more similarities than differences. And I think that sometimes it's clouded.
Exactly. And that's what people aren't pointing out. They need us to stay opposing each other because that's how they control us.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. It's easier to manipulate a crowd when it's broken up into smaller pieces.
Yep.
Yep.
Before you go, can you tell us about your book coming out and when and where people can get it?
Amazon. You can order it on Amazon. The Atlantean is out. The Academy VQ, the Atlantean VQ, the Academy VQ, the Odyssey VQ, and it's under the Vision Quest. So if you go to thevisionquest.com, you can learn all about it. And as I build this world, I want people to contribute because I think it's a totally interactive concept. And part of it is give me your ideas of what the future could be like together.
Awesome.
Okay. Thank you so much. And I'd like to personally thank you for writing this episode. It had a huge impact on me. And the line about teaching our children not to be black or white, but to be human. I've taken that to heart, and I've used that to raise my daughter, and hopefully it helps.
Thank you, guys, and thanks for keeping Quantum Leap out there. Someday I'm going to get the movie made.
All right. We'll be first in line to watch it.
Yes.
All right.
As we talked about, we did unfortunately lose director Joe Napolitano. He had a great career, and our very own Suzanne Smiley is going to tell us more about the career and life of Joe Napolitano.
Last year, we said goodbye to one of the most prolific directors of Quantum Leap, Joe Napolitano. Having directed 12 episodes of the series, his numbers were eclipsed only by James Whitmore Jr., who directed 15. Napolitano's career in directing and producing spanned over 34 years, and his television credits numbered over 40 episodes of primetime dramas. He passed away on July 23, 2016 in Los Angeles after losing his battle with cancer. He was 67. He is survived by his wife Elizabeth and 2 children, Michael and Grace. Joe Napolitano was born on November 22, 1948 in Brooklyn. He started his career as first assistant director in several popular movies, most notably Scarface, The Untouchables, Throw Mama from the Train, The Dream Team, Parenthood, and The Fisher King. When it comes to directing Quantum Leap, Joe had this to say.
Quantum's kind of special to me because it was the first directing experience I ever had, and it was kind of fun, and I went on to do 12 of them. So I owe a lot to Don and Deborah. Yeah, one of the things also about Quantum was, from my point of view, and I think from the industry's point of view, was that we did things back then that were never done. They were like little movies, every one of them. Most TV series have like standing sets, the same set they use all the time. We somehow managed on the budget to be able to go anywhere in the world and shoot whatever we had to shoot, doing it all here in Los Angeles, but every week was a different world, a different town, a different city, a different look. And from a production standpoint, that's very hard to do in television, very hard. But, Don just expected it, and we all stepped up to it. So it was fun in that respect. It was always different.
Napolitano directed 2 episodes in season 2 of Quantum Leap, Pool Hall Blues and Sea Bride.
The first episode I did, Pool Hall, the set, I remember, we need a pool hall. But we didn't want to put cars outside the window because we're on stage and it would look fake. There's nothing you could do to a street when you're inside a stage. So I came up with the idea of putting the set like a downstairs pool hall. So we're like in a basement, right? It'd be really cool is if you saw like there was an alley scene, I remember. And I said, what if we put like a big steel girder, like there's an L train. During the episode, at certain dramatic points, we can do stuff like, a train goes by, so we have the sound of the train. We weren't on location. It was all fabricated. But just stuff like that. You could ask for it, and it would happen.
In season 3, he directed 5 episodes. The Leap Home, The Black on White on Fire, Heart of a Champion, and Shock Theater.
I remember Shock Theater. Remember that set? That was a huge set. It was huge. The set was huge. And I remember it was like, as a director, there was nothing I couldn't ask for that they wouldn't try to give me. And that's amazing in television. And that's what I mean by every one of them was like a little film.
Joe has noted The Leap Home as his favorite episode to direct.
I remember on The Leap Home, we were trying to shoot in a cornfield because it's supposed to take place in the Midwest and corn. It was very important to Don because he came from there, and half the characters were his friends. The names were his friends' names. Yeah. And we go out, where was it? Somewhere out in the valley here, and there was corn, but it was green. Yeah. And Don goes, it can't be green. This time of year, it's dead. It's, it's Thanksgiving. So we had to kill. We had to get rid of it. We had to do something, right? We can't kill it. We can't put weed poison in it. We don't have the time, right? It was already finished, harvesting, but it was still green. They painted it. They painted it. The art department, I don't know how, there was an army of people with like Hudson sprays, the sprayers. They painted all the corn brown so that it would be dead. That was Quantum Leap. Yeah. Nothing, you do whatever you got to do.
The Man was the episode that he had the most fun on.
With Dean, we actually had, throughout the episode, we twirled his hair up on top to make devil horns. Go back and look. You can see it in a few shots. We would do stuff like that just to be crazy.
And in season 4, Joe directed his final 5: Play Ball, The Wrong Stuff, The Last Gunfighter, Moments to Live, and The Curse of Tahotep. Of all of these, The Boogeyman, The Last Gunfighter, and The Curse of Tahotep were also written by Chris Rupenthal, my favorite Quantum Leap writer. At the Leapback convention in 2009, Joe and Chris commented that they had used the car from Raiders of the Lost Ark in The Curse of Tahotep. Although I don't know if they meant that they got the same model or if they actually obtained the original prop from the 1981 movie starring Harrison Ford. But wouldn't it be awesome if they did? In addition to Quantum Leap, Napolitano also directed several episodes of the television series Strong Medicine, Boston Public, Jag, The Pretender, Dawson's Creek, Picket Fences, and 2 episodes of The X-Files, including my personal favorite, the 1994 episode Darkness Falls, about the little phosphorescent bugs released from the trees during a lumber operation. Joe even directed episodes for shows like Ally McBeal, The Practice, Chicago Hope, Northern Exposure, SeaQuest 2032, The Adventures of Briscoe County Jr., and Bones. He also directed the 1991 TV movie Teen Angel. According to the Los Angeles Times, Joe was also an avid astronomer who created a community outreach program that held many public stargazing events. He loved rock music and was proud to have been one of the lucky few to attend the original Woodstock Music Festival. Thank you, Albie, for inviting me to do this tribute to the great Joe Napolitano. I really enjoyed working on it and looking back on Quantum Leap through Joe's eyes. For the Quantum Leap podcast, this is Suzanne Smiley.
I want you to know that if things go wrong, dear, and fate is unkind, look over your shoulder. I'm walking behind.
Wow, that was amazing. Thank you, Suzanne. Now, it's interview time.
Hey everyone, Chris DeFilippis here, and here we finally are talking about Black on White on Fire. Now, Black on White on Fire is one of my absolute favorite Quantum Leap episodes, and normally I'd be giving you one of my regular segments talking about why I love it so much and why it means so much to me. But in the course of putting this podcast together, I had the privilege to interview Corie Knights, who played Susan in the episode, and SaMi Chester, who played Bebe. And I realized when I was editing the interviews and listening back to them that in the course of my conversation with both of those guest stars, I said pretty much everything I needed to say and wanted to say about Black on White on Fire and why I love it so much. So rather than do a separate segment that would just be reiterating those same points, I figured why not just let the interviews speak for themselves? All of my thoughts about the episode come across much more naturally and much more engagingly because I'm talking to 2 people who care about the episode as much as I do. So just sit back, relax, listen to these interviews. I know you're going to love them. They are some of the best ones I think we've ever had on the podcast. Enjoy. Corie Knights spent the first half of her professional career as an actress and teacher, working on feature film thrillers like Copycat with Sigourney Weaver and Holly Hunter, and comedies like Metro with Eddie Murphy. She has guest starred on television shows like Jake and the Fat Man and Nash Bridges. But Quantum Leap fans will know her best from her role as Susan Brewster on the episode Black on White on Fire. We sat down with Corie to discuss her time on Quantum Leap, her acting career, and the work she is currently doing with the animal rights organization WildAid, which is working to end the illegal wildlife trade worldwide. Along the way, she tells us about working with Scott and Dean, her life in and out of acting, and what it's like to be chased by baby rhinos. So without further ado, here's our interview with Corie Knights. Welcome to the Quantum Leap podcast, Corie, and thank you so much for taking the time to be here.
Fantastic. I'm thrilled to be a part of this. Thank you.
I'm especially thrilled and happy to be speaking with you because Black on White on Fire is probably one of my favorite Quantum Leap episodes, in the top 3, I would say. I think it was because until this episode, most of the Quantum Leap episodes had been very conventional and felt a lot like TV at the time, but Black on White on Fire broke that mold in such a big way by telling a bigger, much more difficult and much more compelling story that didn't really feature a pat TV ending, which was very strong. And it's the episode that hammered home to me just how groundbreaking Quantum Leap could truly be. So can you tell us a little bit about how you got involved with the show and how you got involved with this episode?
Absolutely. I was, this was so many years ago, but I was a newer actress starting out. I had just graduated recently from California Institute of the Arts, and I had my agent, and I was in Hollywood, just pounding the pavement, trying to get a job. And so I was extremely fortunate when this opportunity came my way. And I was, of course, thrilled to be a part of this because I really felt like it was a very important piece of work.
Had you been familiar with Quantum Leap before this? Were you a fan of the show?
To be honest, I had not heard of the show before I became a cast member, or a guest starring cast member, you can say. I wasn't a full-time cast member.
Well, the nature of Quantum Leap was that the guest stars were the cast members because there were only 2 regulars. Right. It was as close to an anthology series as you could get at the time. So it really rose and fell on the strength of the guest stars. And I have to say, every guest star in this episode was excellent, you included.
Thank you.
What attracted you to the character of Susan Brewster?
I loved her strength. I loved that she was breaking the mold and sticking to her beliefs, that she was following her heart. And she was madly in love with her man, regardless of the color of his skin, and that she was groundbreaking in her own right, that she was pursuing her career as a doctor, which as a woman in that time period was an exceptionally difficult thing to do. And so I loved the part. It really resonated with me.
Looking back, I see that this episode was written by Deborah Pratt.
Yes.
And it had a lot of racially charged scenes. Were you able to confer with her about some of the heavier themes in the script before you were acting the part? Or what informed your approach to playing the character, I guess is what I'm asking.
I think I brought everything I believed about the character to the audition, and I had no conversations with Deborah beforehand. And she very fortunately liked what I did in the audition and hired me. So I didn't have any part of the script writing. I thought what she wrote was very powerful, and I just showed up to do my job.
Okay. It's funny you say that you just did your job because this is such an emotionally charged episode, and you were required especially to display many different kinds of emotions and very dramatic scenes, very different kinds of scenes. So how did you prepare? When you saw the script, was it a little bit daunting?
It was right up my alley. I love doing work that is challenging and taps into all the different range of emotions. So I was honestly very comfortable with the range and the amount of different emotions that the part carried.
To me, another thing that made this episode stand out was that it had a much more cinematic feel than a lot of the Quantum Leap episodes before it. And I think from that first scene on the rooftop to all the various city locations that you guys were at, and then it culminated in the riots. So how much of that was actually shot on location, and how much was sort of that Hollywood backlot trickery magic?
We shot on the streets in Los Angeles. My first day on the set was actually the first scene in the show. I think we pretty much shot in sequence, actually, if I recall correctly. I met Scott Bakula, and I were introduced to each other about 3 minutes before I ended up laying on that mattress with him and kissing him. So it was a very instant, comfortable relationship. He was incredible. He was so warm. He walked right up to me and introduced himself, and we jumped right into it. So that was the first scene, and it was on a rooftop in Los Angeles, and the rest of the scenes as well were filmed on different side streets in LA. When Lonnie takes me hostage, that was on a set.
Okay, I thought that might be a set, but the funny thing is that doesn't look like a set, because that main scene, it's the episode's climax, and you guys are trapped in that apartment, you and Gregory Millar, who plays Lonnie.
Right.
It was such a sort of a visceral, palpable scene, and you both looked like you were sweltering in the middle of a heat wave. I mean, it was really realistic. Can you tell me a little bit more about what went into shooting that and how you guys got that level of just everything about it rung true?
First of all, Gregory Millar made my job very easy. He was an incredibly talented actor, and working with him put us both right in the present moment. So all it took was us imagining the scenario around us, and we were both there for each other. It all happened very naturally.
You had touched on working with Scott before when you say you fell into that scene, I guess, literally and figuratively,
yep,
as you were lying on his chest. And to a person, everybody that we have spoken to has said that working with Scott is just a treat. Can you tell us what it was like to work with Scott?
He could not have been more supportive, warm. He instantly made me feel comfortable from the moment I met him. You couldn't ask for more in a fellow actor to just be there for you every step of the way. I have nothing but respect and admiration for him. He was fantastic.
And how about Dean? I know you really couldn't do any scenes with Dean, but do you have any memories of working with Dean on the set?
You know, I don't. We had I think one or 2 days where we worked in tandem together, but we didn't have any actual scenes obviously together. But I did meet him, and he was very friendly, and I did not have any. I don't have a big story to tell about him.
No, that's fine.
I'm sorry.
I will get along. We'll get along without it just fine, I'm sure. I guess, okay, so then if we can maybe broaden out to any general stories, funny stories from the set, and just can you tell us generally what shooting was like? Because, as I said, this episode seems so much more cinematic than other Quantum Leap episodes. And if you guys are on different locations, is it still just an 8-day shoot? And what are the hours like? Because it seemed like there was a whole bunch of night shooting and a whole bunch of day shooting. And I'm really curious to know, was it hectic? What was it like?
No, it was an 8-day shoot from what I recall. And we did work into the night. And it was just an incredibly intensive work day. Some of my memories, the memories that stick out for me, the hospital scene where Papa D passes away was an incredibly intense scene, and we were all covered in this sticky, gooey, fake blood that we were all pretty much swimming in and tripping over. I mean, it wasn't funny, but it was. I mean, we were a mess. We were slipping and sliding in that. It was all over us. So I do remember that, and I especially loved my scenes with Gregory Millar. I think that last scene when he's shot was a particularly intense moment, and I can't say enough about Gregory Millar as well. He was wonderful to work with.
Yes, he gave such a wonderful performance in this, very affecting. And it's funny that you mentioned the blood, because I was rewatching the episode to prep for the interview a little bit, and it just struck me that this has to be the bloodiest episode of Quantum Leap ever put to film. Everybody's coated in it. It's just crazy.
Yeah, no, it was all over us and all over our shoes, and we couldn't stand straight, and we were sliding all over the place and slipping into each other. And the smell is actually still to this day, 25 years later, still remember this horrendous smell. It was a sickly sweet smell, and I didn't like it. But that was a very messy scene.
Yeah, I guess that's the breaks of being an actor, right?
Absolutely. No, you won't hear me complaining.
Well, I understand that in addition to being an actor, you're also involved with a wildlife conservation group called WildAid. Can you tell us a little bit more about your work with that organization?
Absolutely. I do the fundraising with our individual donors and all of our trips, and I take people swimming with whale sharks. What WildAid does is an organization that was founded by my husband, Peter Knights, who's the CEO. And what we do is we address the demand for endangered wildlife products. Our mission is to end the illegal wildlife trade in our lifetimes, and that includes shark fin, elephant ivory, tiger bone, rhino horn, manta ray gill rakers. And what we're doing is we're trying to get people to stop buying those products. So we do this massive public awareness campaign in China and Vietnam. And it's the reverse message, where Coca-Cola will blanket, the airport terminals and the messaging on television to get people to buy their products. We'll do the exact opposite. Our message is, when the buying stops, the killing can too. And we have celebrities that do our messages Two of our biggest ambassadors are Yao Ming and Jackie Chan, and obviously Prince William, Leonardo DiCaprio, David Beckham, and the list goes on. We have about 145 ambassadors that we work with. And what we've managed to do in the last decade or so is bring down shark fin consumption by 50 to 70%. And we're now doing the same for elephants and rhinos and manta rays. And we're just about to begin a lion campaign. I don't know if you know how terrible a time elephants are having, but they're being killed 96 a day, one every 15 minutes.
No, I had no idea it was so rampant. I had heard a story about a conservationist years ago. You probably know this story. It's probably old news to you, but he had collected something like, 100 tons of elephant tusks, and he just set them on fire to show the world what a waste it is. And as a protest, and it's just such admirable work. I had no idea that there was such a rampant problem still with elephants. How much did you say, 96 a day?
96 a day. They're saying anywhere from 33 to 35,000 a year are being killed right now. It's no longer just a lone poacher coming in and taking out one elephant. It's linked to terrorist groups. It's helicopters coming in with night vision goggles and AK-47s and taking out entire herds of elephants. It's funding different terrorist groups, and it's a big, big problem. Where in the 90s we had 1.5 million elephants roaming Africa, we now have about, no one knows exactly, but anywhere from 400 to 450,000 left. So if you do the math, it's just not looking so good. But we're right in the heart of our elephant campaign, and we're WildAid.org, and we're making a difference. We truly are, and we have some incredible ambassadors helping us to get the message out. We leverage $196 million in free advertising a year in China to play our messages in prime time. And we're not like the PSA that comes on in the middle of the night. We're the PSA that comes on right after the nightly news. And they're nice ads. They're not just like a point and shoot, look in the camera, boring message PSA. They're high-end, almost like Nike ads with a great ambassador, a great celebrity, and then an animal and our message. So they're exciting, and they're helping to change people's minds.
Okay, so that was my next question. Are the ads, the PSAs, designed to just appeal to people's better nature, to help dry up the market for this thing? And you say it's airing in China. Is that where the primary market for this kind of material is?
That is where it primarily is coming from for the shark fin demand and the rhino horn. Well, rhino horn is Vietnam, but elephant ivory is a big problem, and China is where we're focusing, changing people's hearts and minds.
I understand. And do you do any work to try to get some legislation passed?
We've had some great advances recently. Hong Kong announced that they're going to do a ban on ivory sales. We don't know exactly when that will be, but we do have that. And our surveys show that Hong Kong ivory prices have dropped by 50% or even more than that. So there is hope. We're going to get there. It's just going to take a little bit of time, but we're going to get there. I don't know if you've ever had a chance to go to Africa and actually be one-on-one with an African elephant, but it's one of the most beautiful things that you can do in your lifetime.
My wife wants to do that. She tells me that we need to go on a safari. All I can think of is being on the veldt with a bunch of wild animals chasing me. So I don't know.
I've had lions chasing me and I've had elephants chasing me, and it's an incredible experience. It really, truly is. And now is the time to go. They need your tourist dollars, and now is the time to do it. It's a beautiful, beautiful experience.
Okay, you can't just tell me that you've had both lions and elephants chasing you and then not elaborate. Can you tell me a little bit what brought that about?
No, we just arrived in Swaziland, and the person who we were visiting, I was just in my flip-flops, and he was driving in the open-top Jeep, and he took me off into the bush to go, track some of the elephants that he works with. And we both, the two of us, this gentleman and I, went out and looked at the elephants, and they were not too far off in the distance. And before I know it, Ted is his name, he turns on his heels and runs right past me, heading back towards the car, and leaves me there. And I hightailed it behind him in my flip-flops with a few elephants. They just gave us, obviously if they wanted to catch up with me, they would have done, but they didn't. They just wanted to give us a good scare. So that was great. And the same with the lions. I actually have been chased by a baby rhino as well.
Oh, what's that like? Besides, horrifying.
No, actually, they were juvenile rhinos, and we were in Africa. The roadblocks are sometimes the rhinos or the elephants. If you come across one of them on the road on the way back from your safari, you do not honk or make them move. So you sit and wait for the sun to go down and wait until, in this particular instance, it was 4 juvenile rhinos were asleep on the road. And we waited for them to wake up, and we waited the better part of an hour. And once they woke up, they were in the mood to play. Our Jeep started up, and the 4 rhinos, it's a hilarious picture we have, but they're all chasing the car and running behind us.
Oh, that's funny.
Yeah, no, I also take people swimming with whale sharks every summer. I've been doing that for, I think, almost 7 years now.
Yeah, now you have to tell me, because when my producer Hayden mentioned to me that you take donors on trips to swim with these whale sharks, I had 2 questions.
Okay.
What's a whale shark? And doesn't swimming with whale sharks potentially decrease your pool of donors?
Well, a whale shark is one of the most docile. It is a shark, and it's one of the most docile animals out there. I swum alongside it. You can get right into the bow wave of a whale shark and just catch the thousands of gallons of water that's being pushed through its gills, and just ride its bow wave, and you ride right next to its mouth. And they're incredible. They have never and will never attack a human. They're incredibly sentient beings. And it's the largest fish in the sea, and it reaches a length of up to 40 feet or more. They feed on plankton, so you can safely swim with them. They have massive, massive mouths that they feed along the surface of the water, which is a pretty fun sight to see when you're topside, when you're in the boat, to see these big mouths coming up in every direction. We swim with about 500 of them every year off the coast of Mexico. And no, I highly recommend it. It's a beautiful one-on-one encounter with an incredibly peaceful shark.
That's amazing. How do you track them? Do they stay stationary in different pods around the same area, or radio tracking, or?
That's the thing about a whale shark. No one really can track them because they dive deep, and we don't really know where they go or how they go. But about 7 years ago when we started this trip, we're the only NGO that does this trip that I know of. And about 7 years ago, we discovered, one of our people, Sean Heinrichs, discovered this aggregation of about 500 whale sharks. And they've come back without fail every single summer that we've gone, and it's just a thrilling experience. It takes us about an hour with the first boats out in the morning, and we find them with fishing boats. We have a tower, and we go out to around the same nautical radius when we find them, and you can jump right in the water 2 at a time so you don't overwhelm the shark and a guide, and we get incredible underwater pictures of you on our trip.
That sounds amazing. Now I want to do that.
Oh.
Well, please tell our listeners where they can learn more about WildAid and how they can get involved and where they can go to sign up to swim with whale sharks.
It is wildaid.org, WILDAID.org. And I think there's a link on there for the whale sharks. I'm not certain, but you can find me there. And I'm happy to answer any of your questions about whale sharks or our trip. Our trip is rather costly because we travel with National Geographic level underwater photographers, and it's not just a typical trip. It's for our sort of higher end donors. But it's definitely a once-in-a-lifetime experience, and I recommend it. There's other ways to go as well, obviously.
But everybody that's listening, go through Corie's WildAid charity because it's for a good cause, right?
Thank you. Absolutely. We're doing our best to make sure all these beautiful, majestic animals are around for our children and our children's children and beyond. So,
can our listeners also find you on Facebook or Twitter?
I am on Facebook, but I am not a Twitterer. I have not done Twitter yet. I have an Instagram account that I just started, and I am on Facebook as well.
And let me circle back a little bit towards Quantum Leap, and I guess broaden out from there. Are you acting anymore?
No, I'm not. I did for a number of years. I did theater work, and I guest starred on Nash Bridges and Jake and the Fat Man and other different shows. I did parts in movies, and I did about 35, I think, national commercials. I think one of the bigger parts I did that I was proud of was a Sam Shepard play that was a West Coast premiere of a 2-character play directed by Joseph Chaikin, and I did some teaching as well. And then it's just I always had this love for animals since I was a little girl, and I always volunteered at the Marine Mammal Center, which is a place here that rescues sea lions, and found myself getting up at 2 a.m. to feed baby sea lions, and realized that my heart really was in trying to help these animals. And it was just perfect that I met my husband, Peter Knights, who is a visionary in his own right. He's incredible, but he came up with this idea. to end the demand for endangered wildlife products, because there's really not another nonprofit out there that focuses solely on ending the demand. We do lots of different charities that work on more boots on the ground, on scientific studies, but they'll never solve the problem if you don't stop the demand.
Understood. And that's a good approach, because without the demand, the problem goes away, right?
Well, it certainly will help. I mean, if we don't have all these people buying these products, and shark fin soup and tiger bone and elephant ivory, everyone wants that beautiful piece of elephant ivory on their mantelpiece. Rhino horn, manta ray gill rakers, it's all used as tonics and for medicinal purposes. And they're placebos. There's really no positive effect. We've got to change people's minds about killing these majestic creatures for these medicines and for these trinkets. We've got to stop. There's not enough of these animals left.
Why would you do that? Who would want ivory on their mantle? I just don't understand that.
Well, it's a big sign that you've made it in life. And I have to say, they really are beautiful pieces. They have these factories in China where you can get the most beautiful, intricate carving of an elephant ivory piece. But I think what they don't know is they think that it comes from an already deceased elephant. And I don't think they know to the extent of the poaching and links to terrorism and the terror that's happening when they purchase that ivory. I think they think it already comes from an already dead elephant, which is not the case.
And I guess that's where the PSA and the education comes in.
Exactly.
Well, that's admirable. Now, I have to ask, because the Quantum Leap podcast host, Albert Burge, is a huge, huge Star Trek fan. And in the episode Black on White on Fire, Mark Alamo,
the man who played my father.
Yes, and I always mispronounce his name, but he had a substantial recurring role in Star Trek Deep Space Nine. He was Gul Dukat. And I know Albie is crazy about hearing about what it's like to work with other Star Trek actors. So do you have any stories to recount of working with Mark?
Oh, I just feel like I'm letting you down, because my memory is failing me as far as, Mark was wonderful. He was a wonderful actor to work with. But special stories about Mark, oh gosh, I'm so sorry. No, I just honestly, that whole cast, there was not a weak link in the bunch. There was just everybody. SaMi Chester, Ron Taylor, everybody was just unbelievable to work with.
Yeah, and it comes across on screen. It seems that you guys were really firing on all thrusters for this episode. And as I said, in my opinion, it's one of the strongest of the series, if not in the top 3.
You mentioned earlier what it is that you liked about it, because it broke the mold, and I was just curious what other thoughts you had about why it was your favorite.
As I said before, as much as I love Quantum Leap, they told a lot of stories that were socially relevant, but they did them in a way that were always very safe. And it was always very TV friendly. And you could usually kind of see where, by the third act, you could kind of see where it was all going. But when I watched this one, it was almost transcendent, because it didn't really conform to that feel good, oh, it's all going to be okay in the end. I mean, it literally ends with Sam weeping over the corpse of Lonnie. And to this day, that sticks with me. I've written fiction. I've written a Quantum Leap book, and I've even written that into my fiction because it was just such an arresting image. So that's why this episode to me stands out. Every time I think of Quantum Leap, this is one of the first episodes I remember, even 25 years later. So as I said, that's why it was such. Albie said, "Do you want to talk to Corie?" Me? Sure.
It's so sweet. Yeah, it was incredible. Do you guys still do? I went to a LeapCon convention a number of years ago. Are there still those conventions? Do they exist?
There are not recently, although there is Quantum Leap programming at other conventions. But can you tell me, was that the Leap Back 09 convention?
It wasn't even. It was way further back than that. It was a Leaper convention, and I did a panel, and I believe it was in Las Vegas or San Diego, and there were thousands and thousands of people. It was a Leaper convention, and I don't know who organized it. I just was curious if it was still happening.
Yeah, no, there are fewer and further between these days, unfortunately, because it's now a cult following. And it doesn't have sort of the oomph of a Star Trek, but the fan community is still out there, and they still love to hear from all of the actors that were on the show, you included. I'm sure this is a great thrill. And I can't tell you the response that the podcast gets from actors. I mean, you tell me. You worked on this show 20-something years ago.
Yeah.
Yet here you are talking to me still about it.
I know, it's incredible.
Yeah.
It's incredible. I'm touched that people are still interested and that the show has such an impact. It's fantastic.
And I think it's fantastic that you took the time to speak with us today. Do you have anything else to share from Quantum Leap that I didn't touch on, or anything that I may have missed that you'd like to talk about?
I think, and I apologize if I couldn't remember in greater detail more of the questions that you asked me. But no, I think I'm good. I think I'm quite happy.
Well, thank you very much, Corie, for being with us. Again, that website is wildaid.org.
Yep.
And please, everybody go there and check out this great work that they're doing. Corie, it's been a pleasure.
And you as well, Chris. Thank you so much.
Actor SaMi Chester hit the Chicago theater scene at a young age and has parlayed that into a decades-long career that has seen him working with the likes of Tom Cruise and Oliver Stone on the feature film Born on the 4th of July, as well as Jodie Foster and Robert Zemeckis on the sci-fi classic Contact. He has also appeared on hit shows like Dallas, NYPD Blue, and Doogie Howser, MD, where he had a recurring role playing opposite a young Neil Patrick Harris. SaMi also writes, produces, and directs for the theater. He is the founder and artistic director of the New York City-based Bebop Theater Collective. But Quantum Leap fans will remember him best as Bebe from the episode Black on White on Fire. SaMi spoke with us about his time working on Quantum Leap, his lifelong relationship with Deborah Pratt, and what he gets up to when he's not acting. Enjoy our interview with SaMi Chester. On the phone with me now is SaMi Chester. SaMi played Bebe in the episode Black on White on Fire. And SaMi, welcome to the Quantum Leap podcast. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us today.
Absolutely. Thank you very much for having me. It's a pleasure.
I just want to let you know that I jumped at the chance to interview you because Black on White on Fire is one of my absolute favorite episodes of Quantum Leap. And I just want to speak with everybody who was involved. I've already spoken to Corie Knights, who played Susan in the episode, and at the risk of repeating myself to our podcast listeners because they'll be hearing her interview in this show as well, I'll tell you what I told her. I felt that up until this episode, Quantum Leap felt like a fairly conventional TV program to me, even though I loved it. But when Black on White on Fire aired, it told a much bigger, sort of messier, and much more compelling story, and it didn't have the happy TV ending. It wasn't as pat as a lot of the episodes had been before it. I thought it was a real game changer for the show, and it kind of allowed me to realize the show's full potential to tell bigger, more important stories. Can you tell us how you got involved with the show and with this episode?
Well, I was living in Los Angeles at the time, doing what most actors in Los Angeles do, working on my tan and doing as many pieces of episodic television work that I could. A little bit before then, I had done a movie with Oliver Stone and Tom Cruise called Born on the 4th of July, right?
And I will be asking you about that.
So I came back to Los Angeles after filming that and was just going about my business as an actor. And then I happened to get a call from my agent at the time who said, "Do you know Deborah Pratt?" Of course I know Deborah Pratt. You know, we grew up in the sandbox together practically, right? Both from Chicago. I said, well, they're doing a Quantum Leap, which at the time Quantum Leap was the hot, that was the hot show, right? And I thought, wow, okay, this is really interesting. And wasn't really excited so much until I found out what the show was about, right? That it was about the riots, and then it really piqued my interest. The other thing that was really interesting for me was, and you don't find this out until after you get, on the set, but there was these amazing actors that were involved with this project. CCH Pounder, oh my God, right? I mean, this is a living legend.
Absolutely.
I'm in a scene with CCH Pounder. Okay, I'm good. I can just just go ahead and carry me away. I'm fine, because she is absolutely, of course, amazing. And then you start seeing the other folks involved in the show, right? You see the Greg Millars, and you see, the late, great Ron Taylor, right? My love, Corie. And looking at these actors, and you're going, wow, we've got so much meat to work with. And Deborah's on the set every day, answering questions, changing dialogue when necessary to make it work. It was great.
I was going to ask you about that. I didn't know that you were friends with Deborah. So her being the writer, I'm sure, must have been a draw for you. But since the show was tackling such a sensitive social issue, and it really didn't seem to shy away from exploring all sides of that issue, was there any discussion on set between you and Deborah, or Deborah and the actors, about how you would approach some of the heavier themes in this script? Did they draw lines that maybe you couldn't cross because you were on network TV and they had concerns about that? Did you have to walk any kind of line in putting this together?
Yeah, I think whenever you do network television, you're always doing this balancing act, right? Because there are, network censors, and a show like Quantum Leap, which is on a major network here in the States, they have to worry about, sponsors and different parts of the country. And it was not, you're absolutely right, it was not that kind of tie a ribbon around it, sing Kumbaya kind of show. And I think that is the genius of Deborah Pratt. Because of her writing, it was pretty full, right? And there were times that, the director would make a suggestion, and I would go, okay. And then I would, Greg and I, or Corie and I, we would just, do the work because we're professionals. And they would, okay, fine, cut, and then I would just turn and look across the room to Deborah and be like, that's not how we should do that. She'd be like, okay, fine, let's play a little bit, right? So it was great to have her around. She was very, very protective of the actors and very, very faithful to what that show was about in terms of this country's history at that time.
Were you familiar with the riots before going in for the part?
Oh, well, yeah, I'm black. I lived in Chicago. I'm very much familiar with that.
And I know that sounds like a dumb question on my part. I mean more generationally, because I don't know how old you are. So I don't know if it's something that you experienced personally living through that time, or if it was a little bit before your time.
Well, you have to remember that Deborah and I come from Chicago. And in Chicago was very much a hotbed activity in terms of riots during a particular time in history. Now, I remember the tanks rolling down, Douglas Boulevard and Roosevelt Road in Chicago. I remember the mayor saying that there should be a shoot-to-kill order. You got to remember, these are poor black and brown people for the most part. And also, for the most part, they were basically children, right? I mean, people forget that the Black Panther Party was actually being ran by 17 and 18-year-olds, right? So these riots, these uprisings that went all around the country. It was in Watts, it was in Chicago, a little bit in New York, Cleveland, San Francisco, D.C. These were real-time events in the life of black people at that time. So I was very much aware of what that was. I think all of the actors, maybe with the exception of Corie, was probably aware of that. And I say that not because she wasn't politically astute. I say that because it's a different tone, it's a different beat for her as a young white woman coming into this whirlpool. Whereas for Deborah, Ron, Greg, myself, we were actually there. When you have a brown face, we're having a bit of an issue right here in this country right now where police are killing black and brown people with their hands up, right? And so when you're born into that, you bring a certain kind of energy when you're doing a show like Black and White on Fire, right?
And I guess that goes to the question that I had about your approach to playing the character. And I guess you used a lot of this personal background to prepare to play Bebe, because he seemed to be, in a very racially charged episode, taking on one of the most radical roles in the piece, even more so than Gregory Millar's Lonnie, because you brought such a visceral anger to your presence on screen. Can you tell me a little bit about how you approached playing Bebe?
I just acted. It's quite simple. They actually pay me to act, So it wasn't like, let's go find somebody to beat up white people. It was like, let's find an actor who can read these words and make them come to life. Now, is there something in my life that I could touch on to get there? Absolutely. But at the end of the day, right? At the end of the day, when they say cut, I have to untangle my hand from Corie's hair and say, "Oh, baby, are you okay?" And, okay, fine, now let's go to lunch, right?
And I was going to ask you about that because I was just watching the scene with you and Corie and Scott. And it's probably one of the most pivotal scenes in the show where you really do have to grab Corie's hair. And I wanted to know just what the atmosphere on set was like. I understand that you're all professionals and that you're all actors and it's just the gig, but it still comes across on screen as so genuine. And is that a difficult place to get to, especially if you're working on, say, a weekly series with three people that don't really act together on a regular basis, bringing that energy to it? And I guess the safety that the actors need to know that they can go and maybe push a limit. I mean, you say that you and Corie are close now. I can only imagine that that scene and the kinds of things you had to do together was a big part of getting close like that.
Well, yeah. I mean, look, there's a great amount of trust in acting, right? There's a great amount of trust. And it's really kind of interesting, having done my own series, it's really kind of interesting when a guest star comes on to do that week's episode, right? Because you have to really muscle up and get your stuff together so that this rings true, so that it's not phony. I think that there's a lot to be said for Scott and for Dean in terms of how they treated the rest of us as we came in to do this work. And again, I have to say a lot of that is really Deborah Pratt, right? Deborah Pratt involved in the casting, Deborah Pratt knowing, what these characters should look like, and knowing the artistic capability of doing the work, of something so intense that when you say cut, there were times that the director would yell, "Cut." And, usually in that kind of situation, it's cut, and then there's all this hustle and bustle and people cracking jokes and, people talking about what they're going to have for lunch. But there were times when he would go, "Cut," and the whole set would be silent. People would literally walk away and find a corner so that they could either keep that passion or shake it off so that they could go to the next piece. And I think that's where the acting comes in. And, good acting only comes when you have great writing.
It all came together in this episode, and I want to stay on that just for a moment, and then I want to cycle out a little bit more to working with Scott and working with Dean. But while we're on that energy that you're talking about, that intensity, the pivotal scene that we were just discussing of you and Scott and Corie when you were wrestling with Scott in the clinic, it was literally a bloodbath. Scott even appears to have genuinely slipped in a puddle of stage blood. You were both covered in it. So can you tell me what that shooting day was like?
Hectic, crazy, because we were getting towards the end of the show. I mean, we knew we had read the script, so we already knew the ending, right? I mean, we knew what that was going to entail. It was very, very tense. Actors were giving each other room to go and find where they had to be to do this scene. If you watch the show, I get bloodier and bloodier.
Yeah.
In the show as you know, from day one, when you see us walking down the street to the end of the show with me with the rifle, I get bloodier and bloodier and bloodier. And at one point, if you look really closely, you will see that I have blood in my eyes, and you will see that I have blood in my mouth. So I really wanted to show, as much as I could, that this was not a rehearsal. For these young men, this was not a rehearsal, because it's not. These are people's lives being put on the line. I think that's why people gravitate to this particular episode so much, because everybody, and I mean everyone, from the person that laid out the muffins for us in the morning to the guy that parked our cars when we came to Universal, right? Everybody understood the importance of what this was. There were people who were dying in the streets. There are people who are dying in the streets right now. So I would love, in a way, to revisit that episode. You know, we used to always have a conversation, Deb and I would say, wow, okay, what would happen now, and say it was like 1990, right?
Mm-hmm.
What would happen? What would be with those people?
You're saying fast forward to 1990 from the circumstances that were portrayed in the episode?
Exactly. Where would those people be in 1990? Which is an interesting thought process, because that would take them to Rodney King, wouldn't it?
Most certainly would.
Fast forward to today, that would take us to Aaron Sterling. That would take us to Eric Gardner. That would take us to Michael Brown. That would take us to Ferguson. That would take us to Ohio. That would take us to Tulsa, Oklahoma. That would take us to Flint, Michigan, where they're dying because they can't drink pure water. How would the fight be different?
That's a very interesting...
Yeah. Because people would still be bleeding from the mouth and from the eyes, because people are still fighting that same boat. And it's a country that's created at both. So for us doing the show, it was a gift. And I always go back to Deborah, because it was an absolute gift. I think that she should have got an Emmy for that work.
I agree with you on that.
What was funny was watching Deborah teach, there were like young people who were like extras on the show, who knew about that history, but did not necessarily know the dances of that time. Remember when we run into the party?
Right, sure.
Right? You know, I'm yelling, we're going to burn it down, blah, 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 blah. But before that, they're dancing. So funny watching Deborah teach these girls how to do the four corners and the swim and the boogaloo. So in that case, it was kind of funny on those days.
I'm just curious to know, technically and artistically, when you had to work your way up into those scenes at the end that were so charged,
mm-hmm.
Did they purposely shoot those towards the end of the production cycle so that you guys might be more comfortable working with one another? Did they give any sort of special thought to the energy that you might have to bring to it and where you all needed to be interpersonally?
I think so. Yeah, I do. I think it was very well plotted out by the supervising producer in terms of, for you guys, this is going to be the martini scene, right? We have to save this for the end, right? And I think there's a reason for that. And I think that reason is for us to get a little bit more comfortable with each other, right? If you recall, the very first thing that I do to Scott is yell at him, you know? Like, what the hell are you talking about?
I think that's even in the tease. That's before the opening credits.
You know what I mean? I mean, come on. You know, just you're going to be a doctor? Well, then shut up and sew the arm that I just ripped open. And then you kind of build on that. And Scott is really great. He's really great at doing stuff like that, right? Because, again, this is something that he had to do every week. Sometimes he was black. Sometimes he was a woman. Sometimes he was Chinese. I mean, you know, so we get a chance to play a little bit. But I think that last scene was purposely put there so that we could film that towards the end of the shooting week. Definitely.
Well, why don't you tell us about some of the lighter moments on the set? Tell us what it was like to work with Scott and to work with Dean.
Well, again, it's Dean, right? I mean, again, you know, if you're an actor, oh my God, it's Dean, right? And it's Dean standing next to you at the craft service table. He's right, telling a joke, right? Or it's Scott learning something new for the next week in between takes of stuff. It was really quite amazing to work with these gentlemen. As it turned out, the week that we shot Black and White on Fire, one of those days was Dean's birthday. So it was really amazing to watch them bring the cake in and, watch everybody sing happy birthday and watch Donald Belisario, give him a box of cigars, which was Dean's thing, right? He loves cigars. Mm. It was just great. And again, remember, for all of us, really, we all come from the theater. So we have this kind of respect for the craft. And that makes it just a beautiful thing. And they didn't do the star thing. I'm a star and you're not. And they didn't do that. And they wouldn't allow anybody around them to do that. So it made it very easy to do the work.
That's terrific. Now, since you were talking about coming from the theater, can you tell us a little bit about your own acting history and how you got into acting?
Well, I started when I was around 7. Just doing, neighborhood things. The Chicago theater scene was just, at that particular point, was just on fire. I mean, you had Jack Wallace, Andre DeShields, Joe Mantegna from Criminal Minds, and you had, Stuart Gordon, directing the Organic Theater Company, and Cordes Hurd, and all these wonderful actors. And there I was, this kid, literally kid, hanging out with these people, learning my craft. And I was still in high school. I would sometimes cut classes and then run an audition for plays and then get the play or not. And if I got it, then that meant that I would leave school. Like I would cut a class early so that I could hop on the train and go down to the theater and start rehearsing. And I would rehearse. And we would get out of rehearsals like 10 o'clock, 10:30. And then, of course, there's that actor's time, right, where, everybody goes to the bar down the street or whatever to have a beer or a drink to talk about the work or to get the latest gossip. And I would manage to be part of that. So my actual really big gig in Chicago for me was I did Mephistopheles in Goethe's Faust.
Nice.
And I was what? 15, 16.
Oh, stop. You are not.
I was like 16 years old because I was a senior in high school and I'm doing Goethe's Faust and I'm doing Mephistopheles.
I was going to say, could there be a heavier role for a 16-year-old? I don't know.
Actually, it was amazing. It was really quite amazing, right? Because if I had questions, all I had to do was go to Andre DeShields. Who's doing a serial piece right down the street on Lincoln Avenue called Warp with the Organic Theater. And I was at the old Kingston Mines Theater, which was like about a half a block up the road. So just like, okay, so here's what I'm thinking. And that went really, really well. It was really quite an education for me. And then I got my first equity job in Godspell. And I did Godspell with Carla Jane DeVito and Joe Mantegna and Howard Sponsola was the director, and everything else happened after that, right? Then it was radio commercials and television commercials and doing more theater and, doing hair and doing a European version of hair and choreographing for the Marvelettes.
You're a dancer as well?
Well, I always tell dancers, and there's some great dancers, of course, in New York City, and I always tell them, they say, well, you're a great dancer. And I say, well, when you walk in the room, I'm a singer. Right? So I was one of those guys that could hoof. I was a hoofer. I could hoof a little bit. And was those hippie love rock musicals. So we were all dancing and swinging. So that's what was up there. And then the work just kept on coming. And so, there you go.
And the work eventually led you to another classic science fiction project. Quantum Leap isn't the only one on your resume because I see that you appeared in the movie Contact as the character Vernon. Mm-hmm. So can you tell me more about what it was like being on that set of a huge movie like that? And you have to tell me what it was like to work with the legendary Robert Zemeckis.
Well, Robert's a funny kind of cat, right? That's why he's legendary. But before I worked with Robert, I had worked with Oliver Stone in Born on the 4th of July.
Would you rather talk about the Born on the 4th of July role first and then bring it into Contact? Does it make more sense to discuss it that way?
Sure, we can do that.
Okay, so yeah, why don't we do it that way? I'll give you a little bit of preamble about Born on the 4th of July. When I was talking about Quantum Leap, sort of the pivotal scene that you had with Scott that sort of brought the episode to a different height. When you were an orderly in the PA hospital that Tom Cruise's character, Ron Kovic, comes back to when he's recuperating after coming home from Vietnam.
Mm-hmm.
The scenes in the VA hospital sort of brought the movie to a new place because it was the first time, in my opinion, that the character of Ron was exposed to what the wider world thought about the Vietnam War and the anger that was displayed by a lot of the orderlies that were played by young black men.
Mm-hmm.
It sort of shifted the entire tone of the movie because you didn't have that idealistic white suburban 1960s mindset anymore. It was all of a sudden, wait a minute, this is thornier than he was ever led to believe. To me, it's amazing to be able, again, to talk to someone that was on that particular part of that shoot. So please tell me what that was like. I'm sorry if I'm rambling.
No, not at all. Again, this is a situation where you have these amazing actors, and you have this amazing piece of writing that's in front of you. Add to that Oliver Stone, which is itself like just a shot of adrenaline. Oliver comes to the set, if he comes to the set, he knows exactly what he's going to shoot, how he's going to shoot it. He knows exactly what he expects out of you, the actor. And that's kind of it. I'm really interested in seeing Snowden to see what kind of magic he brought to that, because he brings a certain magic to the film, JFK. This is the guy that wrote Midnight Express, right? I mean, he's an amazing writer and a really nice director for actors, I believe. He has a certain magic, I think, with actors. And he doesn't need you to be scared. He wants you to just put it all on the line. And then if it's something that he can use, he'll use it. If it's something that he can't use, he'll say, I can't use that. Let's do something else. So I had just sort of moved to Los Angeles, and that was my first big movie. I mean, big movie.
Yeah, I think that qualifies, right?
Yeah, and so there I am in a room with the great Oliver Stone, and the assistant outside the audition is saying, now whatever you do, don't look directly at him. I thought, I want to do whatever I want to do, right? God knows this is Oliver Stone. I'm not going to get this gig. So I went in, did the audition. We had a conversation. And he wasn't the big bad wolf. He was just another cat, right? And he's like, yeah, okay, fine. Well, why don't you come back tomorrow? We'll do it. I was like, cool. Now, let me give you a really good piece of gossip. Here's a really good piece of trivia for you.
Okay.
The role that I read for, the other actor who I was reading against was Gregory Millard.
From Quantum Leap.
Yeah. So, of course, when we do Quantum Leap, the first thing we talk about is, so how was that Oliver Stone?
So you're saying you got it and he didn't?
Yes, correct. Because he was reading for the orderly. It's Hollywood, so there's only so much that can go around for black actors anyway, right? So after a while, you get a chance to see or meet the same faces over and over again. And after a while, that competition becomes kind of a mutual respect, because you always figure, well, if it's down to just me and these three guys, then we must be three of the baddest cats on the planet. So I ended up getting the gig and working with Oliver, and he was very, very kind to me and gave me lots of room to do things. And he didn't keep the camera in my face, which I guess in terms of ego, you want that full face shot on the big silver screen, but it wasn't necessarily something that moved the rhythm of that particular scene. Enter Tom Cruise, that maniac. Oh my God, what a fine actor. I mean, every day that I would see Tom, he would get deeper and deeper and deeper into this character. To this very day, I think he was robbed. I think he should have got the Oscar for that role. He was a monster. so I could just see Oliver and him in the corner just having these really, really intense conversations. And the actor in me is like, God, I just want to be in there. I can hear what they're talking about. And then just watching Tom transform into Ron Kovic, who, by the way, was also on the set. So it was wonderful. I really have a special place in my heart for that film.
It is a terrific film. And you're right. I think Tom, personally, I think that might be his best work.
I believe so. Yeah, I do believe that is probably the best thing I've ever seen him in.
So it must be amazing to be a part of that. You have bragging rights, bro.
I had bragging rights for about a week. Then I had to go back to work. You know what I mean? Because, it's not about the bragging. It's about the working. So I could only brag for a week.
Well, you talk about getting back to work. Why don't then we get back to one of the next projects that you did, which I asked you about before, which was working with Zemeckis and doing Contact.
For me, it was a learning experience because I was really starting to spend more time behind the camera as much as I possibly could. I had just gotten to a place in my career where I was like, you're not going to be young and pretty forever. You better learn how to do something else. And so I was really trying to see how great directors directed, how they treated their crew, how they interacted with actors and technicians. And that, for me, working with Zemeckis was pretty cool. The coolest thing was working with Jodie Foster, right?
I can imagine.
I mean, she's a whole industry by herself and is one of the sweetest people you will ever meet. And I would tease her every chance I got. First of all, to see, what kind of sense of humor she had, to see if she could really hang with the boys. Because on that set is Tom Skerritt, right? Matthew McConaughey, right? So we're doing all kinds of silly stuff. We're pulling pranks on each other. We're telling all kinds of jokes. And she was just right there. And so I really have so much love for her. She was very, very kind to me. So I have so much love for her. Robert Zemeckis is slightly different. He's not Oliver. Oliver is more the guy's guy, right? I mean, he's done the Vietnam thing. I mean, he's done all that. So, he has a certain swag. Robert, up until that point, we're making these incredible kind of movies. And I think he was more concerned with the text, with the book, with how the film was looking. We were filming at so many different locations. Fortunately for me, the location that I filmed in, along with Tom Skerritt, was at the Arecibo in Puerto Rico.
Yeah, it looked like a nice tropical setting that you were in.
Yeah, it was great. We had so much fun. And I actually ended up going back to Puerto Rico a few months later because I thought I was going to work on a film project I had in mind. And I wanted to shoot it there because I saw so many really wonderful locations. That ended up not happening, but just working with Zemeckis and watching how he ramrodded his cameras and his crew was really an education for me.
I'd like to talk about some more of your work. I know that you've done a ton of TV. I see that you've played Sam in a TV movie version of the novel Uncle Tom's Cabin. Uh-huh. And that had Star Trek's Avery Brooks, Captain Sisko himself, but also Felicia Rashad from The Cosby Show, and Nick Fury himself, Samuel L. Jackson. Mm-hmm. So I'd love to hear about that shoot. But I also see that you had a regular series of your own called Human Target, and that you also had a recurring role on Doogie Howser with the young Neil Patrick Harris.
Yes.
So any of those projects that you want to talk about, just maybe in terms of where you were personally or how they allowed you to grow as an actor, or just shoot, tell us about it.
Well, I did Uncle Tom's Cabin. Stan Lathan was the director. Yes, Avery Brooks, Felicia Rashad, Samuel L. Jackson. And that was cool for me, especially because I had already worked with Sam doing theater, doing an Eric Obermeyer play called Native Speech with Jimmy Smits, Samuel L. Jackson, myself. We already had a relationship, so it was real cool being on Uncle Tom's Cabin with him. I didn't particularly care for the film because I think that subject matter was a little dark, but not in a good way. The great thing was working with all those wonderful actors and having conversations about this slavery thing. And we were actually filming in Mississippi, and the hotel workers at one of the hotels were on strike. And so B.B. King and Chris Christopherson did a special concert for them in the kitchen of the hotel.
That's a hell of a kitchen.
I'm saying, man. Talk about rattling pots and pans. My memory of those things working on that film were very pleasant. I had an experience of what could only be described as life-changing because we were filming in these old antebellum homes, and I just started walking around, and I ran into the slave quarters. And just feeling that energy was really quite life-changing. And at some point during the course of us filming at this place, all of us, from Felicia to Sam to Rebecca Converse, to all of us at some point just went back there just to see and just to feel. You could actually feel that energy, which was quite amazing. So that's my story about Uncle Tom's Cabin. On a lighter note,
it's kind of heavy. I'm going to let that breathe.
Yeah. On a lighter note, I got a chance to do my first recurring role with Steve Bochco, who everybody wanted to work with at that particular time, and I would imagine still do. And it was for Doogie Howser and young Neil. I kind of got the gig. It was one of those things where they called me up. I went and I did the audition, and then they called me back the next day, and they were like, "Okay, fine, you got the gig." Now, the very first scene I have in the episode is I do this like 2-paragraph monologue to the Doogie that the writers had just wrote. And they were like, "Here, do this." I was like, okay. So again, theater. So I was able to knock that back. And there was such a little chemistry there between the two of us that they just kept on bringing me back. I said, "Okay, fine. Well, okay, well, my agent would call and go, "Okay, don't book anything. Don't do anything next Thursday because you're going to Fox," right? So that was lovely. And then I did I did more episodic work, of course, but then it was The Human Target, which was my series. It was a short-lived series with myself and Rick Springfield. And that was fun because I had seen and been on sets and really figured out how to behave and how to make people feel at home when they come to visit you on your show. And so that was very, very cool. And we had Kurt Baus, myself, Sidney Coleman, the four of us. We had this really nice little groove going. It was a shame that we didn't last longer. But we did our half a season, and then it was on to other things by that time. So it was fun.
Let's talk about some of the other things that you're doing today. I understand that you are the founder and the artistic director of the Bebop Theater Collective in New York City. I'm a New Yorker, too. Tell me all about it and where I can come see you.
I started this company. Actually, it started back in Los Angeles because I was getting to the point where I didn't want to be in LA. I really wanted to do more theater. So Gregory Millar was directing a theater piece and needed an associate producer to come in to kind of keep things together. So I became the associate producer for that piece. It was called As the Beat. It was really kind of ahead of its time in terms of the LGBT community and how they were being accepted even in Hollywood at that time. So I was very proud to be an associate producer on that. And when I left Los Angeles, I went back to Chicago and I started doing some teaching. I actually started a theater workshop. It was called the Community Arts Initiative, and I did that for a while. But I still wasn't getting closer to directing, and so I got the opportunity to go down to Miami. And while I got to Miami, part of the gig was, we'll give you a black box theater and your choice of any other large theater that you want if you come down here and teach, and you can still direct. And I was like, yes, okay.
For the non-actors in the audience, can you tell us what you mean when you say they'll give you a black box theater and a larger theater?
Yeah, a black box theater is initially anything that's under 99 seats. It's just a small venue where you can do a lot. And it could be anywhere from 99 seats to 125 seats. Where I was doing a larger venue was at the Caleb Auditorium, which held 1,500 seats, a little bit more than that. So there I was directing, doing some Tennessee Williams, doing something I really wanted to do and not having anybody go, "Oh, you can't do that." And of course I can. It's my theater company and I'm hiring the actors, so I can do whatever I want to do. So I was doing that. And then Miami got a little stale for me in terms of just artistically where I wanted to go. And so I came back to New York. And so we've been doing stuff here in New York, not as much as I would like, because New York, as you well know, is an extremely fickle lover.
Mm-hmm.
It can love you on Thursday and not love you so much on Friday. And just financially, in terms of finding space, doing rehearsals, those things can get very convoluted. But it makes for a very interesting time at the theater. So I was very fortunate, and one of the first things that I did here was the 40th anniversary revival of Sonia Sanchez's The Bronx is Next and Sister Sonja 21X. Do you know who Sonia Sanchez is?
No, I was going to ask you to elaborate for the ignoramuses in the audience like myself who aren't versed in theater.
Well, Sonia Sanchez is one of the founders of the Black Arts Movement, along with her and Baraka and so many others. She is this amazing poet. She just turned 81. She is absolutely amazing, just an amazing writer, a literary scholar, professor, made it possible for so many black and brown actors to have something to chew on that wasn't always coonish in its delivery. So she's very, very well loved. And I got a chance to hang out with her and direct her plays. So I've been doing a bunch of those with her. In fact, I just spoke with her on her birthday a couple of days ago. And I think we're getting closer to possibly doing another show together. And so what that has led to is this need to really write more. So I see things on the news or I read something online and it grabs my attention and I'll start writing. Well, I saw something online about this woman who had killed someone, and they interviewed her. And I thought, what an interesting story. And so for about a couple of months, all I did was try to dig up as much information on this person as possible. And though it's not going to be about her, it's going to be loosely based on women who kill. And I wanted to do it as a one-character show, not a two-character or a two-hander or anything like that. I really wanted this to be the kind of a tour de force for a black or brown woman, because they don't really get the opportunity to have those kind of roles very much these days. So that's kind of like where I'm at now. And it's an experience in love and disappointment.
Elaborate on that, sir.
Well, I hear this voice. I'll be like lying in bed at 2 o'clock in the morning. This voice will get in my head and she'll be like, okay, I have something to say now. I get up out of bed. I run to my pad and pencil. I open up this computer and then she'll go, I was just playing. I don't really have anything to say. But since you're up, why don't you go ahead and make a sandwich? So we have this very interesting relationship, right? Or I'll be in the middle of the subway and then something will, I'll see something that will trigger something. And so I'm writing this thing and I'm hoping that I can finish it by the end of this year so that I can produce it through Bebop in the spring.
Are you in a rarefied air? Are there many male writers who are writing one-woman shows?
I don't know about that. I don't think there are many at all. It chose me. I didn't say, oh, wow, let me write this one-woman show. It was just something that I saw, I liked. I thought I could do something with it. I wanted it to be from a different perspective. I wanted to test my ability to write as a writer, not as a male writer, not as a black writer, but as a writer. That's something I learned from hanging out with people like Eric Overmyer, right? Don't try to write angry. Don't try to write feminine. Just write, and the rest will come. So I'm doing my best to do that. And if I can get anywhere close, then I'll be happy.
Can you tell us a little bit more about the Bebop Theater Collective, how it works, how you guys mount shows? Do you have a dedicated space, or is it on a per-production basis?
It's on a per-production basis, because what I found throughout my career is that I would go to these, work for these different theater companies, or I would, have friends that would put together theater companies. And then they would spend, 85% of their time trying to do benefits to keep the lights on, trying to get new theater seats because the old ones are falling apart. As admirable as that is, I always thought, wow, there's a better way to do this. Right? Why don't you just lease a space? Why don't you just lease a theater? That way you could lease it for as many weeks as you need. And God bless you if it's a hit and people just can't see enough of it, then work out a way to stay there or move to another theater. But I would rather spend time working on the craft than trying to keep the lights on. That's not my idea of a good time. And it's not time well spent as an artist. So I try to find a scope that I can work in without driving myself crazy. Sometimes it works, and sometimes it doesn't.
At least you had the presence of mind to figure out a way to make that work and to stay in it, because I have to imagine being an actor, a lot of it is discouragement. And I was thinking about something I heard Neil Patrick Harris say when his star started to rise a little bit again. He said, you never know in this business. It's just so arbitrary. And I'm always amazed at people like yourself who manage to build careers and stay in it and have it be your full-time job, have it being what you love and keeping it as your world. The stories that you told today, they're all amazing. You probably have a million more of them. So it's terrific that you're able to sort of still stay in that arena, because you obviously take to it very well.
Well, I think the other thing, Chris, really is that it got to a certain point for me to where acting was not something that I was doing on a full-time basis. So I figured out, oddly enough, at a strange time, that I was really good at this directing thing, that I was really kind of good at this writing thing and this producing thing. And so little by little, I started walking away from acting, pulling back and getting more into direction, producing, writing. And every now and then, I get the itch and I think, I've got another 2 years worth of makeup left. I'm too cheap to throw it away. So maybe I should act on something, maybe I should do, maybe I should do a piece of theater. Or maybe I should do something as an actor as opposed to the other. So that's the whole negotiation. And then I have what I call my side gig. I do a lot of tenant organizing and human rights organizing here in New York City, fighting predatory equity landlords, bad acting landlords, bad corporations. And that has really been actually a lifesaver, just in terms of giving me another place to put my energy so that it's not all about me. So that I can wake up in the morning and know, hey, you know what, I'm going to help somebody today. Deborah always tells me, whenever we get together, she's like, okay, what landlord are we beating up today, right? What corporation are you going for this time? And I don't do it the way that most quote-unquote celebrities do it because, one, I'm not a celebrity, and two, I'm not that obtuse. I really roll my sleeves up and I get in there and I do the work. And that's meeting with, council members and mayors and, nonprofit lawyers. And that's very helpful in terms of keeping me grounded enough to realize that it's only a movie. At the end of the day, it's only a movie. Now, if you can make a good one, right? If you can be part of a great one, that's cool too. If you can write a good play, if you could be in a good piece of theater as an actor, absolutely go for it. But when you can't, or the deck seems a little stacked for you, then you should always have an alternative, doing something else that you love.
Good advice.
I'm so glad you're doing this because all the people involved in this were just such class acts, and it's almost kind of bittersweet because we lost Ron and then Greg. So it's almost like, we can't put the band back together again, right? Mm-hmm. I have very fond memories of all of them, especially Corie, because Corie was the one that would always make us smile because she's such a pro. And what a lot of people didn't know is that Ron Taylor, he was the original voice of Little Shop of Horrors. And I did a production of Little Shop of Horrors. And Gregory did a production of Little Shop of Horrors. So here we were, these three grown men, laughing like kindergarten students at, the little pranks and stuff that we did during the show. There's so many little memories like that kind of keeps it all together and buoyant, I think, for all of us.
Let me get your opinion on this. Being that Black on White on Fire was such a racially charged episode, mm-hmm. and it really took such an unflinching look at race relations at the time. Mm-hmm. Do you think that this episode could be made today?
I do. I would love to direct it or be in it even. I think it can be made today. I absolutely do. I would love to see what Deborah would do in terms of incorporating new material or even as an antique piece. It would be very interesting to see what would happen with that. I would always want to believe that I would love for Deborah to direct it. I would love to see her really get into it behind the camera. I think it'd be wonderful if somehow that could happen.
Well, if it does, give us a call here at the Quantum Leap podcast, because we certainly are going to want to know about it.
Absolutely.
Well, SaMi, tell us where our listeners can find you. Do you have a website, Facebook, Twitter? Give us your info.
Well, there's so much social media out there. Bebop has a website, which is www.beboptheatercollective.org. And, they could go on and see what we're doing there. Of course, they can find me on Facebook. It's a good tool to find out what I'm doing, usually, because I'll post some stuff there. And, just check your local listings. I'm around somewhere.
SaMi, it has been a genuine pleasure to talk to you. You are a really dynamic, interesting guy. And I can't thank you enough for bringing so much to this podcast and for offering our listeners such a great glimpse of what it was like to be on the show. Thank you.
Thank you very much. It's been my pleasure.
Hey everyone, I'm Christopher DeFilippis.
My name is Skipper Martin.
And you might know us as the hosts of 112263, an event podcast. But Skipper and I are here to announce our new podcast, which will be all about the new Hulu series, Castle Rock. Not only are we going to be covering the TV show, but we're going to be covering the Stephen King books and characters that seem to be somehow tied into the TV show.
Not to mention TV movies and other theatrical movies, even the bad ones. Ugh. But we're going to do it. We're going to do it, right, Chris?
Yep, we're going to do it all. So watch this space, subscribe, and we will be dropping our first episode in no time. It's about a certain murderous clown.
Can't wait.
Follow the Castle Rock TV podcast on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at CRTVPod. Visit our website at crtvpodcast.com and support us on Patreon at patreon.com/CRTVPod. The Castle Rock TV podcast is a Fractured Entertainment to Flipside Media production.
Barren Space, professional audio production.
Whether you are just starting out, a seasoned professional, or anywhere in between, we can help you sound your best. If you're a beginner, we will help you find the right equipment that suits your needs, talk you through the hardware setup and software settings, and we'll share tips and tricks and give you feedback that will make you a success.
Barren Space, professional audio production.
When you get started with us, all you have to do is simply upload the recorded audio files to our Dropbox and let us do the rest.
Barren Space, professional audio production.
Your podcast will be produced by top-notch audio producers based in the United States with years of experience. You can get to know your producer and have an ongoing dialogue with them about your show. No more tech support nightmares.
Barren Space, professional audio production.
Enjoy your free time, your quality time. Being a podcaster is fun. What isn't fun is giving up your family time, nights and weekends, or the time you need to make your first million or that next million. Editing your own show is just not an efficient use of your time. Let the experts do it.
Barren Space, professional audio production.
We have many different packages to choose from. We can simply return your fully produced audio to you, or take care of the entire posting process. We will help you apply to iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play, TuneIn, and more. Our experts want to help you be a successful podcaster. Let us be part of your team.
Barren Space, professional audio production.
Contact us today and receive a free personalized consultation call. Email us at barrenspace@gmail.com or go to barrenspace.com/production for more details. Time is the most precious thing we have. Don't waste it.
Hi, everybody. It's Mac Jackson. And I'd like to invite you to 3 of my podcasts that are on iTunes and Stitcher. The first is the Never Gets Old podcast. My co-host, Nathan Shell, and I discuss everything in TV, movies, music, and comics, and swap stories about our exciting everyday lives. The second is the MacGyver podcast, where we discuss Richard Dean Anderson, his television shows, and the positive influence that it's had on us every day. The third podcast is the new MacGyver SG-1, an independent audio series, with the continued adventures of Jack O'Neill, MacGyver, and finding out that they're twin brothers. Check them out on iTunes, Stitcher, and anywhere good podcasts are played. And also, please leave us a good rating and a nice review, and look for our Facebook pages. And follow me on Twitter at MacWJackson. Thanks, everyone. I'll see you at the next adventure.
If you like listening to this podcast, then I guarantee you're going to love Thinking Outside the Long Box and our scintillating interviews with pop culture celebrities.
I have a responsibility, not just to my son, but to everyone I meet, to let you see this is what you can do. This is what you can have. Look at how different I am. My God, look at all these people here. Can I be more different? Jesus Christ. But it doesn't stop me, so why should it stop you?
Our discussions on the classics of pop culture literature and movies.
This version of Night of the Living Dead, I regard personally as my favorite movie of all time.
Oh, really?
I can trace it back to that movie for my love for movies and entertainment.
And of course, our intelligent discussion on all things pop culture. Passively reading the comic book. That's good. Here, I'll put it close to the mic. Oh, listen to me flip the pages passively.
Yes.
And then, so this is aggressive comic book reading.
Oh, man, yes! It's so good!
It's like that.
Wow.
Well, maybe not so intelligent. To listen to us, search for Thinking Outside the Long Box at iTunes or Stitcher, or find us at www.totlb.com. Now back to your super interesting show.
Here's the star of Quantum Leap, Scott Bakula. He's a consummate actor. He's totally into this scene. His concentration is flawless.
I appreciate the offer, but I'm engaged.
You mean to tell me you're going to honestly marry that sugar cookie?
Susan is a very nice girl.
And so am I, if you let me show you.
I really forgot my line.
This is Scott Bakula, and you're listening to the Quantum Leap Podcast.
Hayden, do you have any news?
Hey, Albie. As a matter of fact, I do. I take it you're a fan of Doctor Who?
Love Doctor Who.
Well, in some recent Quantum Leap and Doctor Who news, the recent season 10 finale of Doctor Who was somewhat inspired by Quantum Leap, as the writer of the episode, Stephen Moffat, explains. Just a spoiler alert, if you haven't seen the season 10 finale and you don't want to know what happens, you might want to not listen to this.
And of course, Bill is a Cyberman for most of this story. Cry. Interestingly,
she pulls by the end. I mean, come on.
Yeah. I mean, she gets a happy ending, doesn't she?
Yes, of course.
So that's nice. Interestingly, Bill is, Pearl is in Vision for most of this episode, which I really like. Why did you decide to go down this route?
Well, I was trying to wrestle with the most fundamentally interesting idea of the Cybermen is there's a human being inside there. And that's something we don't very successfully do in Doctor Who. We've tried different versions of it, but I mean, in the end, once people become Cybermen, they look like robots. Bill sees herself as Bill, just as Sam Beckett in Quantum Leap always sees himself as himself, therefore we see him that way. Only when he looks in the mirror does he see who he's become. What if we do that with Bill? Bill feels like Bill, so in her head and in her heart and in her emotions, she's still that. But everybody else, even the Doctor, sees her as a Cyberman.
Yeah, that was a great finale, huh? I'm excited.
Yeah, well, I actually haven't seen it myself yet. I've been so busy, but now I really think I have to.
It's really good. Did you hear about the new Doctor?
I certainly did. So as you and I both know, and now as our leapers will know, the Doctor has once again regenerated, but for the first time, he's regenerated, or should I say she has regenerated as a woman.
Jodie Whittaker.
Exactly. And so this makes the Doctor the second time traveller to now know what it's like to live as both binary genders. The first, of course, being Sam Beckett.
I wonder if she called up Scott Bakula for some advice.
Well, I don't know. I reckon that definitely Scott Bakula can teach her how to walk in heels. So, yeah.
Do you know her from Broadchurch? I never watched that show.
No, I've never had a chance to watch it either. But I definitely like looking at her.
Yeah, she's very gorgeous, and she looks smart. I don't know how somebody can look smart, but she looks smart.
Oh, I don't know. I've seen some pretty sexy-looking librarians out there. So.
Oh, my goodness, yes. I agree with you. And now a sexy-looking doctor, so that's pretty good.
Absolutely, yeah. So who says that only nurses are sexy?
Hayden, do you have any trivia?
I have plenty of trivia, and I'm glad you asked me. I'm pretty much the encyclopedia, aren't I? So I also have to thank Matt Dale, because a lot of this trivia came from the book that he recently released, Beyond the Mirror Image, which is, I think, the closest that we'll ever get to a Quantum Leap encyclopedia. So anyway, the leap in, which we see at the end of the previous episode, Miss Deep South, doesn't have a music track, and it also cuts out all of Sam's and Susan's conversation. But for some reason, they do show more of Sam trying to fight off the attackers. The episode received an Emmy nomination for Outstanding Sound Editing for a Series in 1991. This was the first episode which was written around a real-world event, and this explains why the episode is not written to have Sam stop the riots and potentially save 34 lives, but instead focuses on specific fictional people who are involved. Ray is jokingly referred to as the title character from Dr. Strangelove, or How I Learned to Stop Worrying and Love the Bomb. Captain Brewster refers to Malcolm X in the present tense, although he died in February 1965, 6 months earlier than the leap date.
Oh, is that a little mistake then?
Yeah, a little anachronism. However, it's quite possible that Captain Brewster was a bit ignorant of black issues, or he just didn't know that Malcolm X had died, or otherwise he was so enraged by the situation going on with Susan and Ray that he just wasn't thinking straight. So who knows?
Interesting. I didn't pick up on that.
Yeah. Well, it's a good thing that Matt did. Yeah. Now, it's really lucky that Sam is a medical doctor and that his Swiss cheese memory didn't affect this in this case, because his medical training gets a real workout in this episode. But speaking of his Swiss cheese memory, though, he didn't have any memory of the Watts riots. And when Al actually did remind him of them, he says 35 people died in the riots. But actually, it was only 34. But I reckon we can kind of work our way around this in-universe, because in the Quantum Leap universe, Papa D also died, which does bring the number up to 35. And it also makes me wonder, in the original history, did Papa D actually die? Because in alternate timelines, Susan and Lonnie each died in different scenarios as well. And that would have brought the number up to 35 if Papa D had lived.
Interesting.
Am I making you go cross-eyed yet?
A little bit. But that's good.
Now, this is the third episode which features the gummy bear hand link before its proper introduction in the next episode, which is The Great Spontini. And this is because The Great Spontini was meant to have been broadcast earlier in the season, but for reasons unknown to us, maybe they just wanted to chop up the serious ones with some funny ones. They pushed that back to later on in the season.
Interesting.
Yeah. Now, Al says that Ray lives in apartment 218, but the number on the door says 217. Maybe Mama Harper lived in 217. Who knows?
Maybe they lived right next to each other, yeah.
Exactly. I reckon I could live next door to my mum.
Sure.
Absolutely. Now, in the clinic, the child was severely injured, but he remained perfectly still and silent. I reckon I would expect him to be screaming in pain and writhing in agony and squirming and God knows what else. So, however, I guess it's possible he was just in severe shock, or he might even have passed out, even though his eyes were still open.
Might have to check that out when I rewatch the episode.
Absolutely. Now, another small mistake. Lonnie says that LA General Hospital is 5 miles away from Watts, but it's actually 10 miles away. However, as we know, in times like this, you're not really thinking straight, so maybe he was only estimating and just making the point that it was too far to take Papa D on foot.
That's true, and in real life, people get things wrong all the time, so it's more realistic
Absolutely.
to be wrong. Yeah. Okay, I like that.
So here's a bit of sad news. The Universal backlot in which the episode was filmed was devastated by an arson attack 6 days before the episode aired.
Really?
Yeah. I hope there wasn't any bigotry involved in that and that it was just a random attack, but I guess we'll never know.
I kind of remember that from a long, long time ago.
I don't. It's a bit before my time. And kind of on the other side of the world for me too. So
Little bit.
Yeah. Gregory Miller, who played Lonnie, also played Pusher in MIA.
Pusher. Oh, the drug dealer?
Yeah, I think he was the one that was going to kill the baby.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Wow.
Yeah. It's funny. I never connected the dots either until I read that. And then I'm like, oh, they do look exactly alike. They are the same person.
Yeah. I totally thought they were different people in my head until just now.
Yeah. Yeah. But speaking of people who have been in many episodes, the voice of the radio dispatcher is W.K. Stratton. Now, he's previously appeared in Genesis as Dr. Berger and also in Goodnight, Dear Heart as Sheriff Lyle Roundtree. He would also again loan his voice as another radio dispatcher in Hurricane, and he also appears again in all 3 episodes of the trilogy as Larry Stanton. So his 7-time appearance makes him the longest-serving guest star in Quantum Leap.
Oh, wow. Is he still alive? We should get him on the show.
I've been looking. I'm pretty sure he is still alive, but he's putting my stalking abilities to the test, let's just say.
We still have time. Maybe we'll get him for
Exactly.
Hurricane or the trilogy. That's a good idea.
Yep, we would hope so. Now, it takes Al a long time to be able to get a lock on Sam when the riots start. This actually isn't explained in any detail, but I guess it's possible that due to the mayhem of the riot, Sam's under a lot of stress and so his brainwaves might be affected.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess that suggests that that the ability to see Al actually does depend on the surroundings.
I'm still not totally sure how it all works, but it works enough for me to enjoy the story.
Absolutely. Now, in both this episode and the previous one, Miss Deep South, Sam needs to ensure that doctors remain in the profession. So I've just found another Burger Theory link for you.
There is a definite connection there. I think so. I think that's a really easy go-to for them because it's pretty much understood if you save a doctor's life, then they save countless lives after that.
Yeah, I've really got to get back into the Burger Theory. I did have quite a few linked up, but then I left it for a while.
I'm sure there's a way to do it.
Yeah, that can be my next project.
All the way through the whole series. We can do it.
Absolutely.
We might have to look at the difference in air date order and production order because it might only work in production order. I'm not sure.
Oh, that's a good point. Yeah, very good point. So that means that the Great Spontini will have to watch before the Halloween episode.
Right, which we don't speak of anymore.
Absolutely. Now, Lonnie and Papa D are the 2 characters who die in the episode, and this is a bit unfortunate, but the actors who portrayed them, Gregory Miller and Ron Taylor, have also sadly passed away.
Aw.
Yeah. But CCH Pounder, who played Mama Harper in the episode, has appeared with Scott Bakula in a few more things. She was in the TV movie Net Force, which had Scott Bakula in the lead role. And now she also stars alongside Scott Bakula in NCIS New Orleans.
Do you watch that show? It's pretty good.
I've seen a few of them. I definitely watched the one where Dean Stockwell guest starred. Mm-hmm. And that was the Thanksgiving episode too, I think. Yeah, I had to call up my American friends and try and find out what collard greens were because I had never heard the term here.
They're pretty good. Only if they're prepared in a certain way and with MSG.
Okay, so I'll make sure to try some if I ever end up in the South.
Yeah, they have them canned usually here, so might be able to get them on Amazon or something. They're really good. I tried Vegemite, so you can try collard greens.
Yeah, well, I'll try it. What did you think of Vegemite?
It's strong if you eat a lot at once, but it's good as ingredient and stuff.
Yeah. Well, actually, on the weekend, I went to the Carlton United Brewery tour, and they explained how all the beer is made. And actually, 85% of Vegemite is one of the waste products from when they make the beer.
Yeah, that's what I always thought. Because what is it? Hydrolyzed yeast protein or something?
Yeah, it's a yeast compound, basically. A lot of vitamin B in it, though.
Oh, that's good. I like yeast. I like nutritional yeast. I sprinkle that on stuff, too. So, and I eat active live yeast for no reason, just because I might have a form of pica. Okay, is that all the trivia?
No, one more. Okay. Now, this is something I've tried to connect up with a universe explanation. All right, now, despite being beaten, bloody, and bruised at the time he leaps out, the leap into the next episode, The Great Spontini, has Sam fully healed. Now, here's my explanation for that. In Genesis, Al explains that while Sam's leap from Tom Stratton to Fox happened instantaneously to Sam, it took a week in their time. So it's possible that between leaps, Sam ends up in a state of limbo, where he rests and recuperates. So this would actually suggest that a great deal of time would have to have passed for Sam to heal properly for his next adventure, or else maybe there were just other leaps in between which we didn't see.
Right. Just because we see it in a certain way doesn't mean that's the actual way it happened. That's a good explanation.
Yeah, and I suppose maybe what we'll have to do is try and see where Sam has different length hair. Maybe that can tell us where what the right order is, and how grey his hair goes.
Yeah, Scott Bakula's
the white streak.
White streak, yeah. That's very I think it has its own Facebook.
Well, I don't blame it. It is iconic.
It is iconic.
Yeah, all right. Well, that's pretty much all the trivia for now. So I'm hoping I haven't blown your mind too much and that you'll be able to finish off the episode.
I think I'll be okay. I really like all that trivia, and most of it was from Matt Dale's book. Could you give him a plug?
Absolutely. So I think that he's still selling it on the Kickstarter. It's called Beyond the Mirror Image, The Observer's Guide to Quantum Leap. And, yeah, I was one of the editors of it, and so was Helen Earle and Christopher DeFilippis. And, it's just a fantastic read. It's got so much awesome stuff in there about every single episode and every single novel and comic book and even TV shows which have Quantum Leap referenced in it, and a huge timeline as well. So, yeah, it's huge. You couldn't read it all in one night, but it's definitely kept me entertained for a couple of months. So.
I agree. I think if you're this far into the Quantum Leap podcast, you probably should own this book. This book is for the ultimate Quantum Leap fans, so it's worth picking up.
Definitely get onto the Kickstarter if you haven't already and get yourself a copy of this book. I'm not sure if he's still signing them for everyone, but I'm sure if you ask nicely, he might do it for you.
I'm hoping to have him on the show again soon to talk more about the book.
Absolutely. And if anyone is interested, Christopher DeFilippis actually did an interview with him for the podcast as well. So you can get a bit more information there.
You can check that out on our feed or at quantumleappodcast.com.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, thank you, Hayden, for the news and for the trivia. That was very nice of you. And thanks for joining us on the Quantum Leap podcast. And I'll let you get back to your tutoring.
Yep, I will. I will toot on.
You're an educator first, but also a disciplinarian and a humanitarian. You need the energy of youth and the wisdom of age. You have to be a mediator, and above all, a friend. The more you think about the roles our teachers must play, the more you know they deserve our applause.
Thanks for that, Scott. I couldn't agree with you more. Hey, Leapers, it's Hayden McQueenie here. I'm actually a teacher. I teach mathematics. I'm an experienced tutor as well. I'm currently teaching engineering maths at RMIT University and doing a lot of private tutoring as well. I've recently started tutoring online. So if anybody in any year level, so primary, secondary or tertiary, needs any assistance with their mathematics, by all means send me an email. My email is Hayden, Hayden, .McQueenie, McQueenie, at rmit.edu.au. If you want to know a little bit about my qualifications, I have a Bachelor of Applied Science in Mathematics. I also have a Diploma of Education and a Master of Education. I've been teaching in secondary and tertiary schools for many years, and I'm also the numeracy curriculum developer at the Technology Institute of Victoria, as well as a 5-time presenter at the Mathematical Association of Victoria Conference. So I'm pretty sure I can help you out with your maths. Send me an email and we'll discuss how I can help you out. So once again, that email is Hayden, Hayden, .McQueenie, McQueenie, at rmit.edu.au. I look forward to hearing from you.
Radios, you say? Who's the perfect man to talk to us and tell us about radios in Quantum Leap? None other than our very own Christopher DeFilippis.
I'm Christopher DeFilippis, and it's time for the Quantum Leap Radio Sightings, where I tell you about all the vintage radios that appear on Quantum Leap. And there's no reason to riot in the streets, because Black on White on Fire features 1, and possibly even 2 radios. So let's start with the definite sighting. It's none other than the 1962 Bulova 190 clock radio seen in Miss Deep South. It pops up again for a cameo during the bloodiest scene in Black on White on Fire, when Sam and Bebe are wrestling over the rifle in the clinic. If you look closely, through all the gore, you'll see the Bulova on a table in the clinic's waiting room. I told you about this radio last time, speculating at length about its unique 2-tone cabinet and waxing nostalgic about its place of origin here on Long Island. So go back and check out that podcast if you want to learn more. Which brings us to the next radio in this episode. Or what may be a radio anyway. It's more like a blink and you miss it smear on a shelf over Susan's shoulder in the clinic. I spent a ridiculous amount of time isolating the least blurry shots of this red-white blob, and have concluded that it may, in fact, be a 1962 or 1963 Nordmann Stradella. It has the right general shape and size, and the parts of the blob that may be interpreted as dial and speaker grill are also in the right place. Now, I know Nordmann is not exactly a household name. That's because it was a German radio, and the Stradella was a sleek little transistor set. It was portable with a handle that came in a variety of brightly colored leatherette carrying cases, beige and blue, and in this case, red. But what a German-manufactured radio primarily sold in Europe would be doing in watts in the 60s is anyone's guess. And obviously, I'm completely guessing here. It really may not even be a radio at all. But if it is, it's not anachronistic, and neither is the Bulova, considering Sam's leap date of August 11th, 1965. As always, you can see both of these sets, and every other radio that appeared on Quantum Leap up to this episode, on my website at theflipside.com. Just click on the Quantum Leap podcast link and look for the radio dial. And let me know if you think I'm right about the Stradella. Who knows, we may even be able to retroactively ID this mystery blob if it shows up in a future episode. Until then, this is your Quantum Leap radio guru, tuning out.
Love radio sightings. Thank you so much, Chris. Now, Jessie Newman tells us all about the method.
Break a leg.
There's some very good acting going on in Quantum Leap, isn't there? So it's not a surprise that in a podcast you hear the word or the term method acting quite frequently. So I thought I'd give it a try and attempt to explain more or less what it is. What you're going to get this time around is, in a way, really just an introduction. Something in the way of a teaser, because there's a lot to be said and a lot to be learned. Okay, so you have the famous method. Well, I've Googled it trying to see if I can get something short and easy. I've found a few things, but it's not really saying all I'd like to say about it. I also found that every now and then there's a whole lot of misconceptions. For example, people think that they have to go very far, emotionally even hurt themselves or endanger themselves in some ways. It's definitely not a prerequisite. Some people like going very far, but that's not what it's about. Even the term acting, if you look at it, it's used in different ways by different people. For example, some people use acting for any kind of performing. Even the type of, hey, I am here in my costume, I am delivering my line to you, holding this prop sword in just the right way, muhahaha, here is your cue. That kind of thing. Or the kind of acting where you're really, really believing what's going on, and obviously the actors believe it to a degree, and some people say, well, only that is a real acting. I tend more towards the second. opinion. Having said that, the first thing can be fun, and can be fun to watch, so I'm not actually judging it. I'm just saying it doesn't really translate that well to screen acting in most cases. And, well, it doesn't grab me personally, and I really, really love the other kind a lot more. This is why I have such a strong opinion about it. Well, we have acting as a term, so let's say acting will be acting as in very, really good acting, and that's where method acting really points the direction of, yes, I believe it. I'm with the character. I feel like I'm actually there. Like what's happening is really happening. So is that the answer? It sounds like the definition. You believe it, they believe it. They must be methoding it in some way because you're emotionally affected by what's going on. Yes, it is the result. That's where people want to go. But method is about how to get there. And it's a term that was used really only once by the person who went out to try and discover how good acting works, Konstantin Stanislavski. He watched people do it, he heard of people doing it well, and he tried to figure out how does it work and can it be taught. And he found that it could. So that's where we stand. We know where we want to go, and the next question is, how do we get there? To be continued. That's it from your Bavarian Barbarian.
Next, an all-new L.A. Law. Cusack and Mackenzie clash. And tomorrow night comes the hot new series the critics are raving about. Quantum Leap is conquering the air, says the Hollywood Reporter. Leap into action with a time traveler facing incredible danger. Quantum Leap premieres tomorrow night.
And now it's time for Hayden's segment.
Hey, Leapers. It don't matter if you're black or white or even on fire. I'm going in quantum deep. Quantum Leap was a unique show in the sense that you could tell a story to highlight issues from the past and comment on them from the point of view of someone living in present day. This is no more prevalent than in Black on White on Fire. Watching this episode, it's obvious to me that a clear attempt was made to show that any argument made at the time against interracial marriages were founded on nothing but ignorance, fear, and hatred. If it wasn't for the extreme amount of vilification, discrimination, and violence that these people had to endure just to be able to be with the person that they loved, it would almost be comical. As such, it boggles the mind that now, in the 21st century, almost identical barriers are being placed against others who simply want a legal recognition of the commitment that they make to be with the one that they love. Of course, I'm referring to same-sex marriage. So just at the get-go, I'll point out that I am straight, but I also believe that everyone should be treated with dignity, respect, and have equal rights and equal representation under the law. I can imagine 50 years from now, an episode of the next incarnation of Quantum Leap commenting on the discrimination, vilification, and violence that the LGBTIQ community endures, when all they want is to live their lives as they wish, with who they wish, and have the same legal rights as everybody else. I'm sure that the episode would comment on just how ridiculous the arguments against marriage equality are, and are also fueled by nothing but ignorance, fear, and hatred. So as such, I thought I'd help the writers of Quantum Leap The Next Generation out by writing such an episode. Enjoy.
Welcome, delegates, to the first World Conference of Peace and Human Rights. Over the next 3 days, we will be addressing and discussing possible solutions to some of the greatest issues facing humanity.
Well, if it isn't the keynote speaker. Oh, boy. Al, I can't give a presentation at a World Conference about an issue I don't even know anything about. Don't worry, Sam. There's still a couple of hours before you're scheduled to present. Just excuse yourself and look over your host's notes.
Put that photographic memory of yours to good use. Oh, thank goodness this guy made a printout of his speech. Same-sex marriage equality, moving past the last legally permitted form of discrimination. Same-sex marriage? The World Conference is really devoting a keynote speech to that non-issue? Al, I'm surprised at you. Just because it's not an issue that personally affects you, that doesn't mean it's not an issue. But don't think I'm prejudiced, Sam. I don't have anything against homosexuals. What they do behind closed doors doesn't affect me. So you don't care what they do, as long as you don't have to see it? You think they shouldn't be allowed to openly express their love and commitment? Of course they should. Don't take my words out of context, Sam. What homosexuals do doesn't affect anyone but themselves. I just don't think they should be getting married. Why not? Marriage is sacred, Sam. Marriage is a legal recognition of the commitment that two people make to each other, the combining of assets and the start of a family. That's all same-sex couples want. Marriage is more than that, Sam. There's a divine aspect as well. The Bible says that homosexuality is an abomination. Sorry, Al, that argument holds no water whatsoever. Marriage has existed long before any religion and exists in entirely secular forms. If a religious institution wants to be exempted from performing marriages due to their teachings, they will have that freedom. But part of the right to freedom of religion is also the right to freedom from religion. Church and state are separate. We are talking about recognition under the law. Nobody wants anything extra. Same-sex couples just want equal rights. Well, then, even when marriage is entirely secular, there is something that separates same-sex couples from heterosexual couples, Sam. You yourself said marriage is a legal recognition of the commitment to start a family. Same-sex couples cannot have children. That's a very weak argument, Al. Same-sex couples can and do have children. They can conceive through in vitro fertilization, or they can adopt. And what sort of a lifestyle will those children be exposed to? Orphan children or children rescued from violence or abuse being placed in a home where they know that they're loved, safe, and provided for? I know what lifestyle I'd be backing. But what about the confusion? Every child deserves a mother and a father, and to know where they came from. I wholeheartedly agree with you. What makes you think that the child won't receive that information, and that the extra parent can't be a part of the child's life still? But what about the bad example being set? Oh, Al, you're clutching at straws. Being exposed to homosexuality doesn't make a person gay. The only thing that matters is that the child is in a loving, stable environment and well provided for. That is the best example to set. Remember, Al, 50% of marriages end in divorce. It's not same-sex couples ruining the sanctity of marriage. 50 years ago, people thought that allowing interracial couples to marry would ruin the sanctity of marriage. Remember when I leaped into the Watts riots? I had to keep Susan and Ray together. You were all for them being together, despite how many people at the time thought it was wrong. And from our point of view, we could clearly see how ridiculous their arguments were. That's entirely different, Sam. You haven't been around over the past decade, but in present day, every man and his dog is getting on the marriage equality bandwagon. Nobody chooses the color of their skin. Gay is not the new black. But you're implying that people choose who they're attracted to and fall in love with. Have you ever spoken to a queer person, Al? I've never known anyone to say that they chose to be gay. When did you choose to be straight? Remember when I leaped into the gay man at the military academy? I always absorb a little bit of the characteristics of the leapee, and I can guarantee you, he had no control over who he was attracted to. He could always control what he does with that attraction, though. That's very insensitive, Al. Would you actually keep people who are in a stable and loving relationship apart and condemn them to a life of loneliness or living a lie just for being who they are? Don't you remember how it felt when you were separated from the love of your life? Would you really want to wish those feelings on anybody else? That's not fair, Sam. I was a victim of circumstance. I wasn't doing anything unnatural. Neither are same-sex attracted people, Al. You're a scientist, just like me. If you want to comment on what's natural, you should at least look at what happens in nature. There is homosexual behavior in every animal species. And the reason has actually only just recently been discovered. The reason is so that if any young are orphaned, there are still adults who can adopt them. Doesn't that sound exactly like what happens in the human race? Wow, I guess God really does have a plan for everything, including homosexuality. Did you really think that anyone would choose to be different? How much easier would their lives be if they were just the same as everyone else? But then again, how boring would life be? The only thing that worries me, Sam, is that any change to how marriage works could have a really slippery slope. There's nothing wrong with gays, but if they're allowed to marry, what's to stop people from marrying animals, or children, or just marrying as many people as they want? There are still very clearly defined boundaries. The point of contention is whether or not anyone will be harmed. Abuse and molestation of children will always be despicable. So will abuse and molestation of animals. As for polygamy, somebody's feelings will always end up hurt. What is wrong will always be wrong. But a loving, monogamous relationship between two consenting adults is never wrong. Wow. Well, you've convinced me, Sam. Discrimination is always wrong. I just didn't realize that my ignorance would discriminate by extension. Many surveys have been taken. In the civilized world, it's well known that the vast majority of people do support marriage equality. So why not just put it to a vote, like a referendum? Because that gives a soapbox to the ignorant. They will have a public forum to tell the LGBTIQ community that there is something wrong with them and that they are hated. It will have disastrous effects on mental and physical health. The suicide rate is far too high for the LGBTIQ community as it is, and one person dying is one person too many. So what do? The only thing that fights ignorance is fact, and the only thing that fights hate is love. Be respectful, but arm yourself with knowledge, make yourself heard, and don't let anyone spread any hate speech. When the facts are known, it just seems blatantly obvious that the only reasons anyone would object to marriage equality is that they're just really mean or they're just worried about their own sexuality. Well, Sam, the statement was like a $10 hooker. Not pretty, but it got the job done. I guess I should think of a more eloquent way to conclude. Actually, Sam, you don't. Ziggy says you're about to leap. What? But I haven't even done anything yet. Yeah, you did. Ziggy says that the reason you leaked here was to convince me to join the fight for marriage equality. If each of us is able to convince just one more person, eventually the world will be convinced. So, Al, please tell me, is there marriage equality in the future? Well, Sam...
much, Hayden, for that edition of Quantum Deep. Send all your emails and thoughts to quantumleappodcast@gmail.com. Attention Hayden. Again, that's attention Hayden. What's wrong with polygamy? I mean, if it's consenting adults, polyamory should be fine. I don't see anything wrong with that. Okay, maybe that's on the next episode of Quantum Deep. We'll see. Speaking of email and feedback, now...
Listener feedback.
Yeah, my name is Charles Blaylock. I'd like to be entered into that complete series giveaway for Quantum Leap. Thanks.
Hey, Heather and Albie. This is Donnie in Athens, Georgia. I have a question for Heather since she's watching Quantum Leap for the first time. Heather, I'm curious what situations you would like to see Sam leap into during the second half of the series. You guys do a great job. Thanks for the podcast. Bye.
I apologize. Heather's on assignment and could not be reached for comment.
Greetings. I found this podcast several months ago. It took me until about the 5th or 6th episode to realize that new content wasn't being produced. I stuck around anyway in the hope that something would be released before I caught up. No luck. I've scoured the various platforms, Facebook, Twitter, etc., to see if there was any sort of announcement and couldn't find anything. Is the podcast dead? I appreciate the amount of time that goes into processing an episode. I certainly couldn't do it, but it would be a shame to let the series end early. Here's hoping you can find a way to produce the show in some form that fits into other life expectations. In case you do revive the podcast, I have 2 points to comment on. 1. Regarding leaping in without a net, Sam's Leapy and the Leapy's father are named Victor and Laszlo. There is a character in the movie Casablanca named Victor Laszlo. Are the Quantum Leap characters an homage to that movie? Maybe a question for Tommy Thompson. 2. Regarding the Halloween episode, there is a callback hint to the whodunit mystery from the origins of the series. In the first episode, Genesis Part 1, Sam wonders if he's dreaming, then decides it's a nightmare. He states something along the lines of, if this is a nightmare, when does the come? Then later, I think in the bar scene, Sam sees how Al walks through items and refers to him as the has arrived. So, the Halloween episode is consistent with this dialogue. Don't really think it was purposeful, but interesting nonetheless. Hope to hear from you soon.
In reply, Tommy Thompson said, quote, "No, I just thought the names worked," end quote. So that's your answer from Tommy Thompson, the man himself.
Just wanted to say I love your podcast, and I'm glad I just found it. Thanks. Brandon Cowles. Just a quick entry for the Quantum Leap DVD contest. The podcast is a lot of fun, and one of only 2 rewatch podcasts I listen to, the other being Jumpgate. The podcast is great fun in going over episodes, and is appealing to those who are greatly familiar with the show or those who are just coming in. It is nice to hear others theorize on the same things I did when the show was first airing. Chris Canary. I'm in. Please enter me into the drawing for the box set of my favorite show ever. Too many favorites to count, but I love the Americanization of Machiko as the best heartfelt episode on TV. Thank you. Keep putting out the great tidbits and wonderful memos and pics on Facebook. Love you guys. Renee. Hello, Albie and Heather. I just discovered your podcast in September and took this opportunity to introduce my wife to the series. My What Quantum Leap Means to Me moment. Although we are not discussing the show in the detail way Heather and Albie are, I am enjoying rewatching Quantum Leap again while my wife is discovering it for the first time. Another thing I've wanted to do is answer Albie's questions regarding some plot points. The one that has stuck with me is the opening of Disco Inferno. The dancer is doing the odd dry hump to get Sam into position for the gunshot. There are a few others that are lost to the Swiss cheese effect. I am really enjoying watching the show again, and I'm finding some aha moments listening to the podcast. I do appreciate the insight Albie brings. It would seem to some that he perhaps might have some experience talking about television or movies. When listening to the podcast, I get some insight that I didn't previously see, and that helps improve the appreciation of the show. It's also good to hear the insightful and well-spoken new-to-the-show input from Heather. I think having both aspects of the viewer in one podcast brings a lot of depth to each episode. Thanks to Albie, Heather, and the entire team. And thanks for reading my rambling message. Hello, Heather and Albie. Just catching up on some Quantum Leap with my wife. She's the new fan in this family. She is not participating in the podcast portion of the experience. Speaking of families, I was listening to the So Help Me God podcast when I discovered you two are a family. I didn't see that one coming. Finally, this time, I'm asking about the Quantum Leap podcast Amazon link. Being a Canadian, I'd like to help, however the link, of course, is a US link. I bought Season 1 on DVD when they were first released and then stopped as I heard some of the music was replaced. We've been watching the Season 2 DVD from our local library. I have been noticing the occasional song changes. The condition of library DVDs is often pretty bad and a few episodes have been unwatchable. Despite the changes in music, I think I'd rather buy the DVDs and enjoy the show. As much as I'd enjoy the Blu-ray version, I don't think that will be happening anytime soon. Thanks for all the insights and interviews. I hope the future is as good as the present is. James Connolly.
And joining us now is Quantum Leap superfan Leslie Wenzel.
Hi, Albie.
Hi, welcome to the Quantum Leap podcast.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Can you tell me a little bit about your Quantum Leap fandom and how you came across the Quantum Leap podcast?
I came across the podcast, I think it was 2 years ago. You guys were already, I think you were already well into season 2 at the time. I'm one of those people who was lucky enough to catch it on NBC when it was brand new. I was 14 going on 15 when the first show aired. And actually, unlike a lot of people my age, because I already knew who Dean Stockwell is, and I'm the biggest Dean fan on the planet, self-proclaimed, anything that he was in, I wanted a part of it. I just I have to catch this series. So I got into it because of him, and as a result, I fell in love with Scott Bakula and just the chemistry that the two of them have. And I'm just one of those people who was lucky enough to catch it from 1989 to 1993. So, and when I found out there was actually a podcast with people discussing it, I have to listen to it. And I've been listening to you guys, I want to say since 2015. And I love the episode. There are so many people who bring amazing points of view. It's incredible to be able to discuss the show with people who love it every bit as much as I do. And I'm glad that we're still talking about this 27, 28 years later.
Awesome. Did us pausing for a little while help you catch up?
Kind of. Actually, I didn't really have that big of a problem catching up with the podcast. I'm pretty much, I don't think there's an episode I haven't listened to.
That's a lot of content.
I love the show and I love the podcast. And I've made some amazing Facebook connections because of it. You and Hayden and other people I found through who are also fans, so I'm glad for that too.
Well, welcome to the show. We're very pleased to have you aboard.
Thank you.
Now, you're joining me today because we have some feedback, and I'd like you to join me in answering some of the feedback.
Let's see. The first email is from Chris Etrell. Hello, Albert, Heather. I'm a lifelong Quantum Leap fan who very recently started listening to your podcast. I've been burning through the back catalog quite quickly and enjoying your discussions of the various themes, issues, and messages that many episodes bring to the table, making Quantum Leap the very special show that it is. This is a wonderful podcast you're both doing, and I'm glad that a beloved but still criminally underrated show is being discussed with such detail. I've noticed since subscribing that the show seems to have stopped since last year with the early Season 3 episode, Miss Deep South. I'm trying to find some indication on your site about the podcast, having been retired or that you have decided to stop, but I can't find any such message. I understand if both of you felt you could no longer dedicate your time to such an undertaking of discussing 95 episodes in depth, but I was hoping to get some kind of confirmation on the status of the podcast. Thank you for your time. P.S. While I haven't listened to all the interviews just yet, I really loved your Deborah Pratt interview. Talking to the heart and soul of the show, other than Scott and Dean, must have been incredible. That is from Chris Atrill.
Well, thank you, Chris. I think we're still doing the show. It's been a while. On the personal side, we had the whole Halloween episode curse affect us a great deal. We've talked about that. Heather has a different career now, and she's very busy, and it's very hard to find time for her to be on the show. So she will still be on the show, but we're having more people help us do different parts of the show, as you can tell from this episode. Like we have Leslie helping us with feedback, and we had Hayden do some trivia for us and different things like that. So it's not a big time burden on her and her schedule. So we hope to move forward having a more collaborative show in a slightly different format. But we're still here.
Not to criticize his email, but I think people forget sometimes that this is what you do for fun, for the enjoyment, for the love of the series. And it doesn't mean that you don't have other jobs and you have kids, you have obligations. For me as a fan, I'm like, whenever you're ready, come back when you're ready, I'll be here. So I get irritated at the harsher messages that are sent. Like, where's this podcast? Where have you been? Are you still there? Hello?
I want to do a monthly one, but it's difficult now.
I can't agree with him more about the Deborah Pratt interview. Her interviews, especially the Leap Back convention from 2009, I tear up every time I listen to that particular podcast, because because of the things she mentions about another mother and the history behind what Dean said to her when she brought her daughter Troyan onto the set, and it just gets me in the feels every single time. I'm particularly fond of her interviews. She's an amazing woman.
Same here.
The next one is from Father Beast. Hi, Father Beast here. I just listened to your latest episode covering the Quantum Leap episode, Miss Deep South. Lots of fun as always. I have missed you guys. I got behind on sending you my reviews of the Quantum Leap episodes as they come. I got busy somehow. I think I was working on my review for Sea Bride last. I do intend to get back to that. When you said all of the episodes of Quantum Leap were now up on Netflix, I immediately checked to see if they had Disco Inferno, an episode I had some trouble getting previously. Knowing that Netflix plays the original music that was in the episode, I was excited. But no, they don't have that one. I do thank you for the thing from that Colbert show. I had a big grin on the entire time it played. Also, in this episode, you read some mail from Stephen Munn, I hope I spelled that right, in which he takes exception to some of my points of view. On the matter of whether Sam is physically leaping through time or just inhabiting the bodies of the lives he takes over. When he said that Al directly stated in What Price Gloria that Sam's body was in the waiting room, I went back and watched the relevant scene. What Al actually said was, "Of course I see you as her. Back in the waiting room, I see her as you." Now, while the show didn't actually make a stand on the subject, which is kind of like in Doctor Who, where in one episode it is a plot point that only the Doctor can operate the TARDIS, and the next episode, one of his human companions runs the TARDIS. Nevertheless, I think the preponderance of evidence is for my point of view. But that is just my point of view. Oh, and is it wrong that every time he said headcanon, I picture someone in military uniform with an artillery piece strapped to the helmet? While we're on the subject, while Al was seeing Sam as the leapee and the person in the waiting room as Sam in What Price Gloria, it seems that was changed by the episode Pool Hall Blues. In that episode, Al said he got excited when he saw magic in the waiting room. Stephen Munn also disagreed with me about how I examined the supposed prejudice in Goodnight Dearheart, and concluded that it was not prejudicial treatment. It seems as if he's saying that we should give a segment of people more leeway because of how they have been treated historically. If that is what he is saying, I disagree. Someone had a questionnaire on Twitter a while back that asked, if your son tells you he is gay, do you disown him or be overjoyed? I asked, where's the makes no difference option? To give a group preferential treatment for any reason is not only prejudicial in itself, it is demeaning to the people of that group. And yes, I'm saying that policies which pay men more than women for the same work are demeaning to the men they supposedly benefit. That is because you are seeing them not as people, but as members of a group you classify together. If my kid sees only a few people who are gay in a TV show and starts to think that all gay people are like that, however they are portrayed, positively or negatively, I will tell him that in real life, people are of all types. The same applies about making generalizations about Muslims, Orientals, or people from Oklahoma. Making generalizations is an error in thinking. So I'm just going to have to continue to disagree with Stephen. Love the podcast, Father Beast. I love this guy.
All right.
I love his feedback. He is incredible. There are so many things I could say about this, but unfortunately they involve seasons that you haven't covered yet.
Right. No spoilers for Heather.
I have to say I 100% agree with what he said regarding whether Sam is physically leaping around in time or not.
So what's your opinion on that?
My take on it is he has always been physically, his spirit is not inhabiting other people's bodies. And there are so many things I could say to back this up, and I can't say them yet.
I know what you're talking about. Trust me, I know what you're talking about.
Well, if I tell you, you'll have to edit it out of
right. But you know, and I know, and some of the listeners know, most of the listeners know, but not all of them know. So we'll save that for them.
Right.
All right.
It's actually definitively the take on his leaps is actually definitively described in an upcoming episode, and because I'm so tired, I'm having a brain fart whether it occurs in season 3 or season 4, and I know this series like the back of my hand because I have the original Universal DVDs seasons 1 through 5. So I was one of the people who was originally disappointed with the replacement music in the series. I have Mill Creek seasons 1 and 2 now, and I'm delighted.
Awesome. I'm picturing the actual shot that defines whether he's physically there or not. So I'm right there with you.
I think you know what I'm hinting at.
Yes.
But I think that having Al see Sam as a woman gave the opportunity for some incredibly comedic moments. I think it was a writer's decision, not so much, oh, this is the plot of the story, because you could tell that Dean was having fun with that. Mm-hmm. Al seeing his best friend as this incredibly attractive blonde, and I think that they did it because it was funny. Me personally, I never liked the idea of him seeing his best friend as the other person. Because for the entire run of the series, they were, well, for almost the entire, thinking of the you-know-what episode, they were never able to interact with each other physically.
Right.
So when I first saw the episode, I was put off by that, but it didn't affect my love for the show one iota. So when further down the road, the opposite being true was confirmed, as a fan, I kind of went, whew, I loved it, because I didn't want Al looking at Sam and seeing the other person. That's just how I always felt about it. And I think Father Beast stated his case very intelligently. I don't remember this other person's email. I'd have to actually go back and listen to the episodes again. But I don't think it's up for interpretation. And I know I'm saying, I don't want to come off as sounding like a fan snob, but it's answered definitively. It will be answered definitively in upcoming episodes.
When we get there, and it'll be quite satisfying when we do.
I think so.
Do we have another one from Father Beast?
As a matter of fact, yes. Hi, Father Beast here. As a follow-up to my last email, I wanted to talk about how when I was a kid, I somehow used to think that dogs were male and cats were female. I'm not sure where that came from. Maybe a certain Looney Tunes cartoons where they would generally be a single dog, which was male, and a single cat, which was female. I suppose I could blame them for my misapprehension, but I have to realize that it was just my own inexperience. As I grew up, I had to learn to actually think instead of stubbornly believing whatever was the first thought that came into my young head. Father Beast. I like that.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. For some reason, when I was a kid, I thought the same thing. I don't know. Women seem feline and dogs, and men seem dumb like dogs. I don't know. At least in my group.
Doesn't quite explain Tom and Jerry, though, does it?
No, not at all. What's your take on that? And what does that got to do with Quantum Leap? Did I miss something?
I don't know. I'm looking at his email trying to figure out how maybe he's trying to say that Steven's interpretation is kind of fixed in his own personal bias. And if I am misinterpreting you, Father Beast, please forgive me. I don't know. That's my take on it.
Okay, so if all dogs were male and all cats were female, I don't think we'd have any cats or dogs anymore, if that's how that works, right?
It's very well put. I like I said, I always enjoy his feedback.
Mm-hmm. Heather and I have pet pigs, one male, one female.
Nice.
Fitzgerald and Luna, that's their names. Thank you, Father Beast, and feel free to send us any more thoughts on genders of different animals. I don't know. Who's the next email from?
Oh, this is from iTunes by King of Strong Style from USA. Thank you both. I love Quantum Leap, and I have for years. And I have only just now found something to have in my life to make me travel along with Sam Beckett all over again. After binging the series 10 times already, just for the hell of it, I was starting to lose my will to do it one more time until I found you guys. Love the discussion, especially from having both perspectives of a longtime fan and someone experiencing the show for the first time. Love the recaps, the intro, everything about it just works perfectly. And it's best when both co-hosts of the show, I genuinely feel, are intelligent people, and even only after hearing 2 episodes, I've got a feeling about you two. The same feeling I got when I was 15 years old and experienced Scott and Dean on my TV, watching reruns on Icon TV. Back then, if it wasn't flashy and had a big budget, I wasn't interested. But Quantum Leap changed all that. It was the first show I ever watched up to the point where I cared more about the story than the special effects, which were dated as hell when you're watching in 2004. This show was the catalyst for me and changed the way I look at storytelling, and I'm thankful for that. And proud to join you both for this new journey. Thank you again. That's nice. Thank you for making us, well, in my case, 43-year-olds feel old. But I tease. Like I said before, it's very different for me because I had kind of an after-school activity, and it was up to my brother to actually have a VHS tape in the VCR ready to record because we could not miss Quantum Leap. I wish I still had them just for nostalgic purposes. So it's interesting to me, and also it's great to hear that people are. I'm pretty sure I heard Scott recently say this himself during a convention or an interview, that people's children, people who grew up with this show, their children are being introduced to it, and it's just, that's why it's never going to go away. It's going to literally stand the test of time.
I agree. I think since each episode is a period piece on it in and of itself, it does make it kind of timeless, and the episodes really do stand up to the test of time. So I think future generations will enjoy discovering it as well.
Personally, I always loved hearing the backstory on how they achieved the bringing Dean in and out of a scene when he had to either come through the imaging chamber door or disappear. And I've heard both Scott and Don talk about this multiple times, where whoever was directing the show at the time would yell "freeze" and everybody had to stop moving. There are actually some awesome videos for anybody who doesn't know. You can actually see this process taking place. It's actually on the Owl's Place website, and it's just there are very small clips of him running into the scene when everybody stops moving.
Oh, awesome. Yeah, I love Al's Place.
It's a far cry from how they would technologically do that now, because it's just, they could just edit it in post and there would be no people standing in place and not moving.
Yeah. It's but they did good back then for what they could do.
It's incredible. And the effects actually, in my opinion, having the DVDs, they really do stand up. There are TV shows that I love with a passion, but I can kind of rewatch them without the rose-colored glasses, so to speak. Still enjoying them, but looking at them and going, wow. There are some seamless effects back from 1989 to 1993 that still hold up. They hold up beautifully. Oh boy. I like the heading. In iTunes by Martin Bell from UK. Started listening to this podcast a week or so ago after finding them on Twitter. I love the format. They give a full episode recap and then discuss. I think it would be a great companion to rewatching the series from the start. That's what I'm planning. See, this is cool to hear people say that. It's got to make all of you feel good to know that you are rekindling an interest in a show that people adore and introducing the show to people who've never seen it before.
It is really gratifying just to hear people that say they're going to follow along with us, and they do that. And that's pretty much what we set out to do, was bring a community together of people that love Quantum Leap and also bring new people aboard as we go. And it seems to be working out pretty good.
I couldn't agree more. I love it.
And I just wanted to talk to Scott Bakula, and so I worked for 3.5 years before I did. And so
I can't tell you how much I envy you.
He's a nice guy. Okay, any more emails, or what do we got?
This is the nasty one. Do you want me to read it?
Yeah, we'll see how far we can get with it.
Okay. The podcasters fail to stay on topic is the heading. In iTunes by Ted42 from USA. First, Albie and Heather's witty repartee isn't witty, it's just irritating. This podcast could easily be 30 minutes long if they would just stay on topic. There just isn't enough information about the show. Second, similarly, the hosts seem to constantly talk about things they don't know. It seems like there is no show prep or direction to the podcast. Again, they need to stay on topic. Third, I have a hard time listening to Heather's vocal fry in every single sentence. I understand it's popular to do right now, but this is over the top. The only good thing I found are the interviews with people who worked on the show. Everybody's entitled to an opinion, but yikes.
What is that? He was talking about the vocal something?
I don't even know what he means by vocal fry. What is that? What does that even mean?
I don't know. Should we Google it? Can you Google it?
I'm not even kidding. I don't know what that
vocal
means.
fry.
But then again, I have trouble with LOL speak.
I guess
which is why I don't use it.
I guess we didn't show prep for that thing.
I don't know how that could possibly be true, considering that I've listened to every single episode since the first one.
So what's your opinion on the show?
The first, when I listened to Genesis, I actually initially thought that it was going to be, this is going to be like, kind of like a reaction channel without the video, with just the audio. Because I think you guys were watching the episode as you were making the commentary. That's what I initially thought it was going to be like. But as episodes went forward, I don't know if maybe it's a good time to ask you, Albie, was that a conscious decision that you decided to move away from that format? Because I like it the way it is.
We always had this format in mind because we did a podcast on Terra Nova, the TV show before this, and this is the format that was born out of that. We did do a commentary for Genesis also, so that might be what you're thinking of. I don't know.
That's an excuse to go back and listen.
Yeah. Vocal fry, it means an uptalk or valley speak.
Oh.
So Heather has a valley speak? I had no idea.
Okay.
Maybe it might be just, he might be one of those people that don't like that the new doctor is a woman. Maybe he just doesn't like, doesn't like women in general.
I am immensely enjoying Hayden's posts on the Quantum Leap podcast about that. I haven't seen much of it in my own Facebook timeline.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody's clamoring for, hey, what is this? You're wrecking my childhood. I a bit off topic here. I guess I can be accused of doing the same thing right now. I wasn't happy when I heard that last year that they were going to release an all-female Ghostbusters in 2016. I think I mentioned it on the podcast. I thought it was lazy and contrived, and they were only doing it to appease people who might have been offended by the 1984 original. But here's the crazy part. I didn't go out to see it. I didn't go out to watch the movie. So if I know something is going to bother me, I'm not going to go waste my time on it. But at the same time, hey, if that's your thing, that's your thing. The 2016 version did not wreck my childhood.
I saw it in the theater. I really enjoyed it. I laughed the whole time. So, but I'm all about girl power. He thinks we don't do show prep. You have our show sheet in front of you, put together by Jessie Newman. What's your thought on our show prep?
I've been listening long enough to say I have to absolutely, adamantly disagree with what he said. If anything, I can't imagine everyone who is involved with the show. I mean, you, Heather, Hayden, Christopher DeFilippis, anybody who has donated their time to this, doing it without any kind of prep work. So I don't know. Maybe he's listening to another podcast that he thinks is you guys. But,
maybe that's. I don't know.
I don't know where that's coming from.
Yeah, there's 19 of us on the crew right now. And we take weeks to prepare what we're going to do, and we get together and we do it, and then it takes weeks more in post-production. So I don't know. It's everybody has their opinion, like you said, but thank you, I guess. Well, hopefully he gave us a 5-star review. Well, thanks, Ted. Appreciate the feedback. Hopefully you've heard other episodes, and let us know when you've changed your mind, I guess, or let us know what else we can do. I don't know Valley Speak. Do you know Valley Speak?
Actually, when you say that, when you say Valley Speak, I think of Tina.
Maybe we're doing it on purpose. You never know.
Who knew?
All I know is one of my favorite things in the world is Heather's voice, and my favorite thing to do ever, besides hug my daughter, is ask Heather at the end of the night, how was your day? And she talks, and I just listen, and my heart's all aflutter.
Oh, that's sweet.
Okay, do we have any more feedback?
Ooh, great podcasting companion piece to a great series. This is another iTunes review by Ron Jeremy's Girth from UK. I like it.
Yeah, that's funny.
Heather and Albie, the hosts, are very engaging, and other input from other genuine fans of the series are also welcome and interesting to listen to. It's just a great podcast to fantastic series. A must for any Quantum Leap fan. Huh.
Awesome.
Short, sweet, and very awesome.
I like it, like the name, and I like the comment.
I love his name.
Yes. It's not about the length, it's about the girth.
I think that's all of the emails.
All right. Well, that's pretty exciting. And there are many ways.
There are many, many, many ways. Oh, I think I just did that thing there. The whatchamacallit speak.
Oh, maybe. Up. I don't even know what it's called. I wish I would have prepared.
Oh.
There are many ways to get in contact with us. You can email us at quantumleappodcast@gmail.com. You can go to quantumleappodcast.com and leave us feedback there. We are on Facebook at facebook.com/quantumleappodcast. Remember to like us and join us and get to know everybody in the community. There's over 2,000 of us now.
Woohoo!
We are on Twitter at Quantum Leap Pod. You can call us on the phone. It's a voicemail. Nobody's going to pick up, so don't be shy. It is 707-847-6682, and leave us a voicemail. And we're on Instagram. Remember to go to patreon.com/Quantum Leap Podcast, and please donate anything you can, pledge per episode, so you don't have to worry about it coming out every month, only every episode, which is every once in a while. And every little bit helps us with server costs, production costs, equipment costs. I'm trying to get a good microphone to Hayden in Australia, and that's going to cost a bit. So every donation helps. And thank you to all our patrons. I really appreciate it, and it helps us keep going. Now, Leslie, are you excited for the next episode of Quantum Leap?
Absolutely.
There's
with this opinion, but I feel like it needs to be said because I don't want to step on anybody's toes, but I've heard a lot of, well, there are some pretty hard-hitting episodes. When are we going to get to something when are we going to get to something lighthearted? And I think people forget that this was a drama. Albie, I appreciate it. And I have to say, I don't know. I can appreciate how difficult this is because I was incredibly nervous. So I appreciate you letting me do this.
I appreciate you helping us out. It's really great, and I'm sure everybody's going to love it. Until next time, I'm Albie.
I'm Leslie.
And then we come up with something witty. This always takes a while because we don't prepare.
That was perfect.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of the Quantum Leap Podcast, hosted by Albie and Heather, with contributions from Hayden McQueenie, Suzanne Smiley, and Christopher DeFilippis. Visit us at quantumleappodcast.com and look for us on Facebook and Twitter. To support the show, please go to patreon.com/Quantum Leap Podcast. The Quantum Leap Podcast is edited by Albie, Christopher DeFilippis, and Juan Muro, with voice talent provided by Juan Muro, Hayden McQueenie, Suzanne Smiley, Christopher DeFilippis, and Peter Vonasak. The production assistant is Jessie Newman. The executive producer of the Quantum Leap Podcast is Albert Burge. Juan Muro, Christopher DeFilippis, and Hayden McQueenie are the co-executive producers. The thoughts expressed on this podcast are those of the individual and do not necessarily represent or reflect those of the Quantum Leap Podcast, its partners, or affiliates. The Quantum Leap universe and all it contains is the property of Belisarius Productions and Universal Television. The Quantum Leap Podcast is not affiliated with Belisarius Productions or Universal Television, and no copyright infringement is intended. The Quantum Leap Podcast is a Barren Space production.
How's that?
Yep.
Okay.
Sounds good.
Sounds good.
One take.
Yep.
You're a one take pony.
Yeah, as long as I'm having a stroke, I don't stutter. It's awesome.
50 years ago, people thought that allowing interracial couples to marry would ruin the sanctity of marriage.
Chit chat for 5 minutes.
That's kind of what we're doing anyway.
Yeah, General Twivia.
General Triv.
No, I didn't.
Hayden and I already recorded that part.
Oh, God. That's going to be a blooper. What is that?
It might be.
A combination of trivia and Twitter.
And you just made something up. You just made $1 million.
Oh, I wish.
Twivia.